Thank you very much. Good evening, members, and welcome to the second meeting today of the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Overview and Scrutiny Board. For members of the public, my name is Councillor Steve Bartlett, and I'm the chairman of this board, and a very warm welcome to this evening's meeting. Could I just hand over to Claire Johnson, who will be looking after the admin arrangements for our meeting this evening, who's going to give us a quick brief on arrangements for this evening's meeting. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Chairman. Please note the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Board being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. In order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone present follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited to do so by the Chairman. Always turn on your video function when invited to speak. Please state your name before you speak if you have not been introduced by name. Please could you mute your microphones when not talking. If you would like to speak on an item, please do so by utilising the raise your hand feature in the bar at the top of the Teams window. The messaging bar should not be used unless you are raising a point of order or providing the wording for a motion. Please remember that this panel is visible to all and subject to public information requests. If at any point you would like to speak again, please use the raise your hand feature again. If a vote is required on any item, the Democratic Services Officer will call out each board member's name, beginning with the Chairman and Vice Chairman. Please could you respond with for, against, or if you wish to abstain. Finally, please could everyone ensure that background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Agenda item 1, apologies. Do you have any apologies, please, Claire?
Yes, Chairman, we've received apologies for this meeting from Councillor Rigby and Councillor Cox, and item 2 is substitute members. We have received notification that Councillor Wilson will be substituting for Councillor Rigby and Councillor Mike Brick is substituting for Councillor Cox.
Thank you very much, Claire. Declarations of interest. Members, do any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interest or local interest on any items on the agenda?
Would like to Councillor Hazel Allen.
Thank you, Hazel. Sorry, I didn't see a hand go up there. Looks like I might be having problems with my hand up again. Yeah. Would you like to say what that interest is, please, Alan?
Yes, I'd like to declare that I have a pecuniary interest in being employed by Dorset University Hospitals Trust, and I run a service that goes across Dorset which does engage with homeless people, and as we're discussing homelessness and health today, I just wanted to make that declaration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see nobody else in the meeting, so we'll move on to agenda item 4, public issues. Claire, are you aware of any public issues brought to the board's attention?
There's no public issues for this meeting, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 5 is the forward plan. I'm just going to quickly go through this. So looking at our forward plan for our next meeting on the 17th of May, we have scrutiny of the domestic abuse strategy. We also have a couple of items, BCP, and at the moment it's noted as TBD. What I'm going to propose is that we move that to the 14th of June, which the member that who actually requested this in the first instance was Councillor Tony Trent, and I'm not sure if he's online tonight, but he did ask that we discuss this on June the 14th, along with the issue that he has raised on highways. And so what we may do is address both of those items at the same time at that meeting. Then we're looking at an enforcement report. Now the aim is, and that we discussed it this afternoon, but there's been a lot of interest expressed by members and ward councillors regarding enforcement issues in their wards. And what we thought we would do is to have a scoping paper first of all, just to see the size of enforcement across the council. You know, how many people are involved in it, what the various disciplines are, how they're organised, and we'll use that as a basis for then producing some kind of scoping report that we will look at in the future, either through a working group or through the main board. But the first paper will be very much a sort of a starting point to look at some of the issues that so many members are interested in. Moving on, then we have report visitor planning, which is the arrangements for the forthcoming busy period, hopefully through the summer, down at the beachfront and parking enforcement and all those issues that we've seen quite a lot of information in the paper already. But this will be just to look at the overall plan, see how we're organised, make sure that we're satisfied that all the arrangements are in place and we're content with it. And that really takes us to the end of oh yeah, there's just one item that has cropped up. We thought we would like to continue with our portfolio briefings, and although I haven't actually asked Councillor Haynes yet, but the idea is that we would ask Councillor Haynes if she would be prepared to give us a presentation on community safety aspects, and if that meets with your agreement, members, then I will ask her if she could present that. And I think that really then brings us to the end of the next meeting in May. And the only thing I'd offer. Yes.
Apologies. Can I just make a comment on that?
Yeah.
Bearing in mind that report will be written probably in advance of the of knowing who the new police commissioner is, might it not be more sensible to push that back because we don't know?
Why don't you think that'd be leaving it a bit late? And the information is probably already there.
I just wonder if she might come back and say, well,
sorry, you're talking about. Sorry, I beg your pardon. I'm across purposes. You're talking about portfolio brief.
I am.
Okay.
Community safety. It just feels like timing's a bit strange with a new police commissioner who won't have yet decided what their priorities are, and that needs to be sort of mashed together. I don't know what other people think.
Yeah, I mean, I'd go along with that. I would be happy with that. So we might, of course, we have to bear in mind that the cabinet plan does tend to change, and in fact there may be other cabinet items that we'll want to bring into the agenda in May anyway. So if members are happy for us to be flexible about this, we can work out a sensible agenda for May, sort of offline, and then get round to you. Then we'll do that. Yeah, Councillor Kelsey.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think that what Councillor Sayes just said is a very good idea, actually, Chairman. I think it'd be a good time to do that. Can I just be, I don't know, a bit silly maybe, or a bit stupid? We had the other night a member engagement session on domestic violence, which was an incredibly good report and an incredibly good piece of work by everyone concerned. I'm just wondering why we now need to see it all again, bringing it to scrutiny. Okay,
well, there's probably a couple of reasonable answers to that. One is that the member briefings do not give the proviso for making recommendations formally through to cabinet or full council. You know, and this is this also involves the public, of course, because overview scrutiny is very much for the benefit of the public as well. And so that, you know, we have to be seen to be scrutinising the decisions that are going to be made by council. And, you know, domestic abuse strategy is one that will have particular interest for a large number of organisations and individuals. And it's only right that they get the chance to see what the council are doing to, you know, in those areas in terms of its policies. So I think, you know, the member briefings generally have been very useful. There's no doubt of it. They're very informative, and it does give an opportunity for all the members to get an insight into all these different areas. But we must, they must not and should never be a substitute for the overview and scrutiny process.
I just think it's a bit strange sometimes. That's all. Just my personal opinion. Well, we sit through 2 hours of them where we have our opportunity to say what we think, and then we sit through another day like today where we're having item after item after item with extra items also added on, and I'm just thinking of the time consumed in reading all of these documents, etc., we maybe need to look at how we're doing things again.
Well, I think if anything, there is probably a timetable.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I have no control over when the member briefs come out, and in fact they're given at fairly short notice. I'm not criticising them; they're very informative. But as I say, you know, we mustn't let that distract from the overview and scrutiny process. But maybe we have a decent time interval between subjects dealt with both by briefings and by scrutiny.
Yeah, I think that could be a way forward.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Slade. Did you want to say something else? Sorry, you're muted.
Councillor Anderson has his hand up, but I did want to come back on that. Councillor Anderson, did you want to say something first?
If the chairman will indulge me, I would like to say something about this.
Okay.
And it's basically, if I may, Chairman.
Yeah, please go ahead.
It's your road maintenance item, which you were going to reconsider after we've given you your presentation on it, which we had last week, which Councillor Trent, who you asked to have this put on, was attended and made some quite useful comments into the meeting. And you did say that you would discuss this and consider it after you've had that. So I just wondered whether you still actually want to have this. Because I hope that our presentation was sufficient to cover everything that Councillor Trent wanted and the members.
Yeah, one of the issues, and I have received some communication from Councillor Trent on this, and one of the issues here, and again, it's about public accountability, because he as a ward councillor is being asked what's happening to certain specific things in his ward, which he hasn't addressed and not addressed through the briefings that he's got. So he needs to be seen to be taking the actions that his residents want to, and also for them to see democracy in action, if you see what I mean. So there is an obligation for us to make sure that he can do that. But there are still some issues that he has that he feels that he wants to put to ONS, and the ONS board did agree that we would do that. We thought we might be able to minimise that through the briefings that you gave, and again probably through to today, even with the highway strategy that we're going to be looking at in a minute. But he does want to bring it to overview and scrutiny, and so I don't think we should deny him that opportunity.
Chairman, if there are any issues that he wants to bring, I'm more than happy to discuss them with him. I always have been, and I'm sure Councillor Green would say the same. He hasn't come to me with any issues, but if he wants to email me or even phone me, I'm more than happy to discuss them with him. And
okay, all right, thanks. Can we leave it there? Councillor Vicky Slade.
Yeah, I don't want to criticise the member briefings. I think they have been incredibly useful. However, I'm very frustrated that they're now appearing up to 3 times a week, which is really unfair when you're trying to hold down a job. It's not acceptable to be expecting members to be available for 2 hours a night, 3 nights in a week, and if you're not there, then you feel like you're going to be marked as not taking an interest in important issues, and I think that's wrong. And the short timeline is crazy, and I mean, I feel quite sorry. I thought I'd never say this in my life. I feel quite sorry for Councillor Green, because I think what he's going to present to us in about half an hour's time is exactly what we heard 48 hours ago. So I totally understand. This is scrutiny. Scrutiny has to be seen to be done. We have to be able to challenge. But there's no point if Councillor Green was going to take on board any comments that were made 48 hours ago, the paper's already written, so it's a bit pointless. And yeah, so I think I would rather we scrutinised better and had fewer member briefings and perhaps sent people documents. The other problem with the member briefings is you don't get the papers in advance, so you can't actually prepare or engage. It feels very one way. And whereas I feel like I can ask detailed questions at scrutiny and get proper answers and actually have some interplay. So, if we have to do more of one and less of the other, I'd say more scrutiny, less briefings. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Slade. Yeah, one thing I didn't mention for May was actually the domestic abuse strategy, which is on the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that probably brings us to the end of the discussion on. One thing I would just say is that if members, because we do have to plan ahead, and if members want to cast their eye on the cabinet forward plan, I know it keeps changing, chopping and changing all the time, but if there are issues coming up for scrutiny that are on the cabinet forward plan, please let us know so we can put them on our agenda as early as possible. Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Slade has actually just said pretty much what I was going to say. Two comments I would add to. I find that a number of the ONS subjects that are reviewed are often a questionable use of time. Some of these papers that we examine are a slam dunk before they arrive here, so why do we discuss them? Others are quite fundamental or quite major and should be discussed. So I do wonder whether we should be more selective on what we allow to be brought forward. And the other question I have, and we are in a transitionary phase with a lot to do, is one ONS board sufficient, or do we need to split it into a more acceptable format? I mean, there is a children's ONS, there's the adult services, we're dealing with everything else, and then you get issues like the environment and other related matters. I do wonder whether we need to split that and indeed perhaps be more selective in what issues are allowed to come forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor O'Neill. Of course, the agenda is within our own decision. It's up to us. So if we're discussing things that we shouldn't be, then it's our fault because we're the people that have selected the topics and agreed them. But then very often you pick an item that's on the scrutiny cabinet plan, and you don't really know what you've got until you got it. Which is an issue, and you don't actually understand necessarily. You get a brief overview from one paragraph that says what it is, but when you actually get it, it could be very little or it could be an awful lot. So it is quite difficult, and it really needs careful consideration. And you are right. We do have two very, very long meetings in one day, and and we have discussed before with Democratic Services staff the issue about maybe we need another overview and scrutiny committee. But what I would like to do, rather than get into that debate now, because otherwise this meeting will go on and on and on. I think we'd take that offline if members wouldn't mind, and we can carry on that debate with Democratic Services. But thanks for raising it, because we can now put that in the minutes and take it as an action to discuss it.
Agreed. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I was a few minutes late at the start, but in the earlier session you said that the pool key item that I'd raised would be discussed later.
Yes. I
don't know whether you did discuss that. Or...
No, we haven't, and I was just waiting for you to remind me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's kind of two related issues here. There is the fact that pool key clearly needs an intervention because it tends to get missed out of the regeneration picture because there aren't actually regeneration sites on it, and therefore not an obvious spin-off in terms of associated monies to improve the state of the infrastructure on pool key. But the other issue which was raised in a briefing that officers and Councillor Green gave us last week or the week before, I suggested this was a more general problem across all key tourism sites, that we need to maintain them at a level, and there is currently, Councillor Green admitted that there is currently no mechanism within the council to actually maintain important sites to a certain level of quality in terms of infrastructure. What we have is people that go around fixing things when they seem to be broken. Like if there's a hole in the road, that hole will be fixed, but there's nobody taking the bigger picture view and looking at the quality as a whole of the place. So some of our key sites can deteriorate and degrade without us really noticing it, and that has a knock-on impact. So Councillor Green recognised that, and he acknowledged the need perhaps for a separate pot of money or pots of money that should be ring-fenced to key sites for their maintenance. So I'd like to give him time to come forward with a proposal, but I think perhaps 6 months down the line we should be asking him to come and explain what the general strategy is for protecting, maintaining the infrastructure of key tourist sites.
Yeah, you've raised some interesting points there, and of course that expands the issue about the development of Pool Quay itself, which was very specific, to a much broader question. Now, my reaction to the question about Pool Quay was, where does that fit in within the regeneration policy that's being looked at the moment? And so I'm sort of,
if I could make a suggestion, Chair.
Well, just let me finish, because a lot of these areas that you're talking about, I would imagine, are going to be within that regeneration area. I don't think Councillor Philip is here this evening, but we haven't invited him to discuss that. So I think for the purposes of this meeting, what we'll have to do is put it on the forward plan and put a title to it, so we get a marker down as to what we think might be needed, and then we can invite the appropriate portfolio holder to make a comment about, or portfolio holders, to what they might be able to provide. How does that suit you?
Yeah, we have actually an item on the forward plan called Pool Town Centre Master Plan. I don't think there is any master planning exercise going on at the moment, so perhaps that's the item that needs to be retitled and repurposed, so it needs to be more of an. I think we're more of a stage where we need to question the portfolio holder and officers as to what their ambitions and plans are, and what they perceive the problems to be that they're trying to fix. Because, as I say, I don't think there is a master planning process actually going on.
Okay, well, I thought we'd actually specifically taken the Pool Centre Master Plan out of the agenda specifically because it was going to be fitted in with the regeneration plans that Philip Broadhead is looking at.
Maybe it didn't have a date on it, but it is floating in the list somewhere.
Okay, all right, well, let's just note it for the forward plan as an item, and then we can discuss it with portfolio holders and see what we can come up with in terms of addressing those issues and those sites that you're talking about. Will that be all right?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, thank you. So I think that brings us to the end of the forward plan. Agenda item 6, which is scrutiny of what sustainability related cabinet reports, and the one we have this evening is the highways asset management policy, and that will be introduced by Councillor Mike Green, portfolio holder for transport and sustainability. Could I ask members to be very specific? As we've heard already, we've had quite a long discussion with this, if you were in attendance at the brief we had the other day, but if we could keep the debate specific to the paper that's in front of us, that would be appreciated. So with that, Councillor Green, could I ask you to present this paper? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just before doing so, I hope you'll indulge me, Chairman. For those who weren't at the briefing, the briefing last week, it isn't that I, as Councillor Howell suggested, admitted that there is no way of us funding these. I was, as he went on to say, it was that I recognised that none of the constituent councils nor BCP has ever had a specific pot that's been put aside for high value assets, which many of them would be in the tourist areas. And I mooted the idea that maybe we should have a separate ring-fenced pot. Whether that's something that will be able to compete with other financial demands or not, I don't know. But I think Councillor Howell and I are going to be very much on the same side on that one. Anyway, to move on to the paper this evening, which is the Highways Asset Management Strategy and Policy. Highways are very much the forgotten asset of BCP, but as their replacement value is estimated at a little bit shy of £3 billion, it's not really surprising that the government, which basically funds them for us, wants to ensure that we look after them efficiently. So each local authority has to publish the Highways Asset Management Strategy and Policy, but although each council writes its own, they're almost completely determined by the duties under the Highways Act and the requirement that if we're going to receive the necessary government funding, then that strategy has to be driven by the approach of minimising the cost over the whole life of the asset, while keeping it in acceptable condition. And the result is that all these strategies right the way across the country are pretty much identical. And this one that's coming through tonight is a mirror replacement, really, of those of the three individual strategies of Bournemouth, Poole and Dorset. So really, with all of our own assets, the carriageways, the cycleways, footways, bridges, street lights, traffic signals, all of them are surveyed at a regularity that's appropriate for that classification, and their condition status is noted and recorded in a report. That then determines when they're going to receive routine maintenance and the form of that routine maintenance that they're going to receive. And it is separate from the reactive maintenance, which is sort of pothole filling and that sort of repairs as it goes along. As Councillor Bartlett says, the maintenance itself isn't actually part of this paper, but hopefully members who came to the briefing last week are pretty much aware now of the broader subject of highways maintenance, and should have a pretty good understanding of that. And hopefully those questions will already have been answered. But if there are some questions remaining about the strategy itself, which as Councillor Bartlett said is a small part really of what we were talking about last week, then Lynn Waite's here to help answer, because pretty much any of them are going to be quite technical. If there are none, then I'm sure she'd be regretful of an early exit. But really, over to you, Chairman, and your members.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Andy Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, unfortunately, I missed the briefing, so but obviously I was deep into this last year, so I understand a lot of the detail, and I will confine my comments to the paper itself. As Councillor Green has said, this is a very significant asset being maintained, and I know that the team worked really hard on not just keeping the status quo, but improving where they can. But I was a bit catchy in identifying priorities and hierarchy. Although it mentions those words, it doesn't really make it clear what our strategies and hierarchy is. And perhaps then that's a problem for the Department of Transport rather than us if we've copied their papers. But page 58, asset inventory. We don't even know how many miles of pavement we've got, or how many miles of cycleway, for example. So when we're looking for bidding for funding for them, I think that's a real challenge. So I guess my first question is, what priority is being given to actually measuring, understanding what we've got in terms of particularly pavements and cycleways, so that we can then make bids and support their sustainment and development. The second one is around page 6061, climate change and environmental conditions. There seems to be nothing specific on the existing assets and mitigation for climate change around things like shading, water retention disposal, and drought and high winds, the impact on street trees, and these are things that again, you know, given I know the ethos of the department is trying to improve as we can, as we're maintaining. We need to worry about more surface water, more problems with drainage, and more problems with street trees blowing over or becoming a problem on the pavement particularly. Third one's around strategy and hierarchy by asset type, and as I said, there seems to be little in terms of highlighting what the hierarchy really is. So it talks about highways being the A to C and unclassified roads, and a special mention of the problems around the condition of minor roads, which I think are inspected every 4 years. but the increased problems with GPS, meaning that more people are using them as though they're major roads. The problems of pavement parking and the reliance on enforcement. People think they can get away with it, so they do, but particularly the pavement parking destroys the pavements, and that's a real problem. And my fourth and last point was around the decision impact assessment, and it was just a positive. Actually, natural environment, it said there's no impact on the natural environment. I think actually the maintenance of the good highway infrastructure supports the natural environment, because certainly, again, things like the watercourses, the sustainable urban drainage, which was highlighted as being more expensive to drainage and flooding impact and street trees and soft landscaping and wildflowers. I think we do quite a lot there. So I think, you know, there is a positive thing there which wasn't mentioned. So it was a positive uplift on that one. Thank you.
Councillor Green, four main points there.
Thank you very much for the points of that. I think sort of two of them really are around the hierarchy, and I will bring Lynn in a second on that one. On the decision impact assessment, yeah, well, thank you for the compliment on it. I'm not sure that it really quite ticks the government boxes that are required for it. And really, as you'll know, Andy, this document is pretty much prescribed for us, as is the hierarchy. I agree with you that it isn't particularly well articulated within the paper, but again, Lynn may be able to give us a little bit more detail on that one. I too am disappointed that almost a couple of years into BCP, we haven't yet been able to count up the number of kilometres of footway and particularly cycleway, which I would have thought we should have there pretty soon, because it's not that difficult a task, the cycleway one. So again, if Lynn's got any more on that, I think we'd like to hear that. Climate change, I think there is more potential within the way that we implement the policy and the strategy, rather than to embed it within the policy and the strategy itself. Again, the DIA obviously looks at the climate change effects on it. I do absolutely agree that we would want to be looking at particularly the drainage and the and water runoffs, etc., and also potentially at materials which ensure that we are contributing less to the emissions, which fit in with everything else that we're doing. But I think it's probably more in the implementation than it is in the strategy and the policy itself. Again, if I can bring in Lynn to see whether on any of those she'd like to add, please, if that's okay, Chairman.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I on the number, the length of footways in the preceding authorities across Bournemouth, Poole and Dorset, we had different survey regimes. So in Poole, we had collected quite a lot of data on the footways, and there was different amounts available across Bournemouth and Dorset. So at the moment, we're still collating that information and getting ourselves onto a 4-yearly survey cycle. So over the course of the coming year, we will be picking up any outstanding footway data. So we have collected the majority of it. It's just those final few pieces. And with cycleways, again, I have got a bit more information to update the document with on the amount of cycleway on road, off road. So we do have the information. Some of it, it's just the final collation exercise. You mentioned hierarchies. I mean, they are broadly set by the road category, but also by its use as well. So just looking at the highways inspection policy that our colleagues in environment operate to, we've got the primary network, which is A roads, freight routes, the winter service network, and any Highways England diversion routes. We've got the secondary distributor network, which is B roads, bus routes, and the precautionary network, and then the third category is pretty much everything else, which is the bulk of the unclassified network. I think there was something else that you asked about, but what was your third question?
Pavement parking.
All right. Yes. Well, yeah. I can't answer that. That's an issue for enforcement colleagues. Actually, there's one other thing you mentioned about the unclassified network. There's two types of surveys. There's our machine-based survey, which categorises the condition of it, but they are inspected by environment colleagues in accordance with the inspection policy, and that is more frequent than every 4 years. And again, that would depend on the hierarchy. So there is a safety inspection that's carried out annually at least. But the 4-year interval is for the machine-based survey.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I bring in Councillor Mike Brooke, I'd just like to ask a question regarding the surveys and how are they actually accomplished? Because I noted in the report it talked about the way the highways were actually scanned. You had a vehicle to do that, but I just wondered how you did it with the footpaths, which across Bournemouth at least have been decimated by the fibre installation maybe a decade ago, and they're still in a dreadful state. And so I'd be interested to learn how the pavements will actually be surveyed.
They're done by a person who walks them all.
Okay, and when can we expect the initial survey to be completed?
Well, we've got the last few years worth for the pool area, and we've got some for Bournemouth. But it's a 4-year programme, that so over the course of 4 years, the surveyors would cover the whole footway network.
Thank you, Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just clear on this. This isn't a case that every 4 years you get data. This is that over a 4-year period, every footway will be inspected. So, and in fact, some of them obviously where they're more trafficked, then they're more often than that. So it's just that what the survey, the condition survey is constantly updated. Literally every month something will be updated because that road has now been inspected, and 12 months later that particular one will be. So it isn't a case of saying, there it is, that's what we're going to do over the next 4 years. It's just a continual process. Yeah,
I did understand that, but I thought there was an implication in the report that there was no data available for the pavements in Bournemouth, and that's what prompted my question.
I think the thing in the point of the report was that they hadn't been measured and given a total kilometre length as we have for the carriageways. So both for footways and for cycleways, that still needs to be established and the final sums put together. That then won't change too much, apart from the fact that we're all very hopeful that the cycleways number will be going up month by month.
Okay, it wasn't really the length that concerned me; it was the condition of them. But thank you very much for that.
So, sorry, could I just add something again with the footways? There's the two types of survey. There's the surveys that are done as to determine more of a forward maintenance plan, but also that the footways are inspected by colleagues in environment who will undertake a safety inspection, and those are done more regularly. So there's two types of survey. They're doing their risk-based safety inspections, and we're doing more serviceability inspections to determine a forward programme of capital works.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Lynn. Okay, Councillor Mike Brooke.
Fine, thank you, Chair. And some of the points that Councillor Hadley raised as well, or at least similar themes. Can I start, Councillor Green, with reference to climate change? On page 80, the little review of climate and the impact of the strategy says that the strategy doesn't assist in reductions of CO2 and other greenhouse gases. And yet
on page 84, it says the strategy does assist in a positive way and contributes to improved health and well-being. Now, since air pollution is harmful, how can this strategy actually assist health and well-being if it's not reducing CO2 and greenhouse gases? That's my first question. The second question relates to potholes. The strategy identifies the need for sort of efficiency and value for money in maintenance programs, but how can our current method of filling in potholes be both efficient and value for money when it's a quick fix, just plonking tarmac in, because very, very quickly the areas around that pothole have been worn, cracked and everything else. That breaks up. The fix also breaks up and you've got a bigger, larger pothole to come out and deal with a second time. Surely we should be looking at a more permanent, more lifelong fix for potholes. And there's reference to footways not wearing away as much as highways, and that's pretty obvious that feet are not going to wear the pavement away as much as heavy cars, lorries and so on. But actually, with the utility works that go on along footpaths, there's a much bigger impact on the footpaths than on the roads in many respects. And of course, there's been reference to parking on the pavements as well. It seems to me, therefore, that the strategy is underplaying the need for maintenance and repair work on footpaths. And here again, the less work that's done on the footpaths, the less you are going to get people, especially elderly people, and that's one of the issues we have in this conurbation, fewer elderly people actually wanting to walk and use those pavements. So it isn't actually, again, going to improve health and well-being because the footpaths are deteriorating. There's not enough money being put aside for maintenance, and therefore, once again, that discourages people from using the footpaths as opposed to encourages use. And finally, well, two other points very quickly. We've got no reference to, as Councillor Hadley mentioned, work on trees and biodiversity. One of the key factors in reducing CO2 along roads is, of course, tree planting and putting in the appropriate trees. And there's no reference at all to a positive approach to CO2 reduction there. And drainage and gullies maintenance. There are known areas where gullies are blocked and seem to be permanently blocked. There are areas where the roads flood after heavy rain, and yet nothing is done about them. And even the annual sequences of gully cleaning don't resolve those problems. So there are problems that need to be looked at and highlighted, and perhaps priorities given to known areas to work on, as opposed to having continued, as it says here, maintenance activities have either ceased or significantly reduced. Now that isn't any good when we have increased intensity of rainfall and downpours and our gullies and roads can't cope because of various problems. So 4 points there, or possibly 5.
Thank you, Councillor Green.
Thank you.
Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chairman. It is very rare that on scrutiny that I say to Councillor Brooke that I'm not sure that he's quite got it right on these. We normally tend to be very much in agreement. But most of what you're speaking about there, Mike, is about reactive maintenance. And the Highways Asset Management Strategy is not about reactive maintenance. And this is the whole point. When it comes to potholes, etc., the prescribed way that we have to go about putting our strategy together, the inspection routines, etc., are about ensuring that the assets are maintained, their structural maintenance, their routine maintenance, as opposed to the reactive, is done to ensure that they are at an adequate provide service or in adequate condition throughout their whole life at the most efficient price. That is the whole point of the strategy that is dictated to us by government. If we do not do that, then we will not get the funding. That is, I mean, there are different pots that come from government, but it was absolutely prescribed that if you have not got that and you're not taking that approach, then you will not get this chunk of funding. So it's almost as if this strategy should be written by the DFT and just handed to all of us. But that is the case. Yes, a very substantial element of that is how do you spend the money wisely to ensure that you don't keep having to do the potholes, and that is exactly what the strategy is doing. It says when it gets down, in layman's terms, when the surface gets down to a certain level, at that point you're going to start to have more and more potholes. At that point, it makes more sense to do something serious about it than financially it does to keep filling the potholes. That is the whole essence of the policy. Tree planting, etc. I agree with you, absolutely, but it's not part of the strategy, and it can't be part of the strategy because it's outside the government requirement for it. And I hope that sort of explains. Gully maintenance on this is not about keeping gullies unblocked. It's about making sure that gullies are in the state that they can be unblocked and making sure that they are not broken and they will not be breaking. Again, it's about trying to split out routine maintenance from reactive maintenance. I think once we get there, I'm not sure if you were at the briefing last week, Mike, but that spoke very much about the reactive side of it and how we might try to minimise that as we go forward. I hope that helps, Chairman.
If I can come back, Chair, very, very briefly. Yes, I was at that meeting the other evening. Actually, in your answer, you have made the very point that I was actually making, that there is a mismatch between this strategy, which is to get things into a position where they can be regularly maintained in a reactive way, and the fact that there is this mismatch. And while ever we continue, the gullies, for instance, there are some in Broadstone where no matter how much cleaning is done and the gully itself looks fine, somewhere down the line the pipes are blocked. But no one, despite time and time again, has responded to the request from councillors and the public to actually deal with that. So that isn't a reactive one. It's an issue of there are areas where roads or gullies are blocked or potholes are breaking up to such an extent because the road is so badly damaged that actually they need to be repaired properly so that they can then be maintained at a proper rate. But what I am saying is that while I accept that they're catered to, that somewhere there is this need to relate and reduce your reactive maintenance, so that, in other words, you've got to, through this strategy, surely we need to be building up the quality of our roads and our pavements, not coming back time and time again. There's a mismatch.
Steve, you're on mute.
Oh, yeah. Do you want to come back on that briefly, please?
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. I don't agree there is a mismatch at all. I think that is exactly what the policy and the strategy are doing. They are saying at this point, when it becomes a red, this is the work that needs to be done, not just fixing the potholes, but going all the way up in some cases to resurfacing. But you do it in a way that means that the amount that is spent over the whole life of the asset is going to be minimised. So when it is still at the point that the potholes are only forming now and again, effectively, that is what's done. That's what the policy says. When it gets to the point that you've just made there, Mike, about the potholes are coming again and again and again and again, what do you do about it? the policy says that is the time that it gets much more serious treatment. That is what the strategy and policy is about.
Okay, Councillor Green, thanks very much. I think we're going backwards and forwards here. What I suggest you to do is go outside and sort it out. And if there is a recommendation that you have about the strategy paper itself, Councillor Brooke, then maybe you'd like to scribble it in a thing and put it forward. But I want to move on now, otherwise we're going to be here all night. And I'd like to call on Councillor Derek Baltwick. Thank you.
Slight change of subject here. Enforcement. I get lots of letters from schools, parents who complain about parking, and they are the biggest offender. But the point is, I contact the police, I go to the enforcement office, and they've got no staff spare to go and monitor this situation or make an appearance, would obviously make the parents do something about it. Well, but people get annoyed when someone parks on their front garden for 10 minutes. So there's no enforcement.
Thank you, Councillor Baltwick, but I really don't think that this is actually, that point, whilst it's understood, is not relevant to this strategy paper. Councillor Green, did you want to say anything?
You have that absolutely right, Chairman.
I think Councillor Baltwick, it does touch on the areas that we were talking about enforcement earlier on today, and an area that we will be addressing. So a general look at all types of enforcement in May. Okay, thank you. Councillor Vicky Slade.
Thank you. I really do sense a real frustration here from everybody inclined to. We're all so keen to improve our roads, and I think, you know, we're all just trying to get in on it as we can. But I do understand this is about the strategy for regular maintenance. So I'm hoping I'm going to get this right, Councillor Green, and not stray off. First of all, briefly on tree planting, because it is talked about how the impact of the tree roots is affecting our footways. There is probably, I think, a bit more that could be said in terms of how tree planting could be a method of reducing future flooding, because that flooding comes up several times here, and obviously the gully issues. But I just wonder whether whether there's something missing in the strategy about innovative ways as climate change impacts our roads, that we need to consider how we look after our roads. So, you know, yes, we talk about climate change, it gets sort of a bullet point several times through, and we talk about sort of flooding causing potholes, but we haven't said much about how future planned repairs and improvements to roads could be done differently in more innovative ways that take account of climate change. For example, using different materials, different colours, different construction methods that might cope better with more heat, more flash flooding and that sort of thing. I just wonder whether you might want to comment on whether there's space in there somewhere to reference that so that it's acknowledged. The other thing is, under the desired outcomes, there are several sort of desired outcomes for each area, and I'd like to see something more around switching to things like more intuitive crossings and making our crossings more inclusive, because there is talk in there about you know, intelligent traffic lights, but actually it doesn't say much about people. It feels like it's talking about cars and efficiency and LEDs, as opposed to making those crossings safer for people. And can we include in our assets? I know, and it might be that there might have been an other that I missed. Those wonderful new cycle assist things that you've put in Soapers Lane, which are so amazing. But when a cyclist comes to a crossing, they can actually lean on, so they haven't got to get off their bike and on again, because they are so amazing. And we should be making life easier on things like cycleways, but they are all assets that are going to sit within the highway assets. So, you know, please can we make sure that we don't forget those assets that make life easier for people. And the final question I have is, I don't understand in the footway priority what that hierarchy means. Is there somewhere I can get I understand the ABC on roads, I get that. but I don't understand the hierarchy on footways. If you can point me somewhere to read up about it, I'm happy to do that.
Councillor Green.
Thank you very much. Some of it was on subject, Vicky. I'm putting it the safety of the crossings and pushing it towards people. We all feel that, obviously, but this is again a document that is there for the government to tell us whether we get the funding, because we are ensuring that the asset is being maintained in the most cost-efficient way over its lifetime. So in that one, I don't know the answer on whether there is the possibility to include more experimental reference to more experimental things. I don't know. What I will do is to explore that before it comes to cabinet, and if the answer is that it is possible to put a line or a paragraph in, then I would be very happy to do so. And unless Lynn waves at me and tells me that I'm wrong, the cycle buttons are part of the infrastructure that's down under ITS, the intelligent traffic systems. Some of those intelligent traffic systems are not that intelligent. They do include just straight dumb traffic lights, etc. But they are all bunched together under the title ITS. So yes, they are included in that.
Okay, Councillor Slade. Okay, Councillor Jackie Edwards, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask whether electric charging stations are considered part of our highway assets, and any new ones that are going to be installed, are they going to be privately run, or are the council going to install some, and therefore I think should be considered part of our assets if we include traffic lights and gullies and things? Thank you.
Councillor Green.
Chairman, I will ask Lynn to just confirm. I would have thought they should be included within highway assets as we go through, and that's probably the case. That would be the case even if they were privately run, because it is that would be the service that is delivered through the asset, but the asset would still obviously belong to the council. Again, if Lynn would like to contradict me if I'm wrong, but I would assume that would be the case.
Yes, I have to say it's not something that's been raised before, but I would tend to agree with Councillor Green that they should be part of the asset. But if yeah, I can take some advice on that as to where they sit, and if the strategy needs updating to include that, I'll liaise with Councillor Green to sort that out.
Thank you, Lynn. Okay, Councillor Edwards.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Howell, and this will be the last question I'll take on this paper because we need to press on. Thank you.
Yeah, just very quickly, it's just something a comment that previous speaker raised in my head. Intelligent crossings. I mean, the most intelligent crossing is the zebra crossing, isn't it? Because it requires both the driver and the person crossing to use their intelligence. And we should be doing that wherever possible. And it's also the cheapest way of putting crossings in. So, I mean, do we have a policy in terms, where do we sit in this? Because I know many people feel that we've been putting too many automated crossings across the conurbation, and zebra crossings just work much better, especially if there's lots of them, because people get used to actually using them.
Councillor Green.
Yeah, there is obviously a debate about what sort of crossing is going to be the better one. It would sit within the question on road safety rather than within the highways asset management strategy and policy, though, Chairman.
Okay. Councillor Howell.
Well, I mean, that's not really an answer. I mean, I accept it might not be in the strategy, but I think it's certainly something that could save the council money, assuming we're spending our own money and not government money on it. And you know, a lot of people find the signalised crossings inconvenient anyway and just walk across them if there's nothing coming. you know, I accept for some people who are less confident they may be useful, but really in a lot of instances, I think we could manage road safety a lot better with you know, and more cheaply if we use zebra crossings. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a point of view that Councillor Green, you might like to take away with you and to think about. And I think that is now going to be the end of that debate. I'm not sure where that takes us. I don't think we have any recommendations tabled for it. So that being the case, I'll move on to the next agenda item. Thank you, Councillor Green, and thank you to Lynn as well for helping out this evening. Much appreciated. I'm sorry we've kept you up a bit longer than maybe you'd hoped.
Okay,
Thanks very much, Chairman.
Thank you.
you.
I'm going to bring in agenda item 10 now, rather than move on to item 7, which is an urgent business, which is the scrutiny of an officer decision to supply and fit electric barbecues across the seafront. We've got Chief Executive Graham Ferrand here this evening who's going to introduce the item, but I understand that our Section 151 officer Adam Richins is here, along with our Chief Operations Officer Kate Ryan, and also Chris Saunders, the Director of Tourism and Culture, and Nick Perrins, Head of Planning, also portfolio holder Mohan Iyengar, and also Councillor Mark Anderson, all here to talk about barbecues this evening. So we've got a lot of people involved. So with that, I'll call upon Chief Executive Graham Ferrand to introduce this decision. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. I think you've probably taken 50% of my introduction with the list of names of those that are present to support any discussion. So thank you for that. So this was an officer decision record taken in the context of a whole range of decisions around our investment in the seafront for this summer, reflecting on the experiences of last year, looking at the timing and positioning of the release of COVID restrictions. There are a range of activities that we've invested in using a range of funding sources, COVID Outbreak Management Fund and others. This one we separated out because there was the potential identified to use Community Infrastructure Levy as the funding route. So it stands alone as a decision, but I'd just sort of suggest to councillors that we view it in the context of that wider set of decisions that were being taken. I'm happy to take any questions. I mean, this was one of those initiatives where we're trying to get rid of that, the danger of disposable barbecues used on the beach. We know there's been plenty of occasions when people have either disposed of them without thinking into the gorse or the growth on the cliff and caused damage there, or we know of cases where they've been buried into the sand as a convenient but completely unacceptable method of disposal as well. We've been looking at the idea of these electric barbecues for some months now. This was an opportunity alongside those other bits to try and upgrade the offer on the seafront, make it more attractive and also make it safer. I don't know whether members wish to discuss the service itself or primarily the funding route. So I'm happy to sort of leave the introduction at that and take any questions and then work out who's best to pick them up if that would be helpful.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chief Executive. Yeah, I'm sure there are a number of issues, but you've touched on some of them already. And I guess I'd probably like to kick off. We're trying to understand why what should or would appear to be a capital programme, that what has been under consideration for some time, and what I understand this is just the first part of a bigger programme, is not included in the budget and is not itemised as a capital expenditure programme, and that now is calling upon SIL to fund, and also the decision is being made under emergency decision arrangements when it is a programme that seems to have been in gestation for some period of time. So I think with those points, Chief Exec, maybe you'd just like to respond to those in broad terms.
So I think gestation might be too strong a word for it. We've been looking at the options, looking at the issues, but to be frank, I think this was an opportunity to introduce this alongside the other changes that we're making on the seafront for this summer. taking it through any other process would not have either allowed the order to be placed in time to get the delivery or get delivery for the summer. So it was a question if we need to do it for this summer, or if we want to do it for this summer, that was the only way we could do it. Happy to bring in Adam Richards in terms of the funding route for that, if that's helpful.
Chair.
Yes, please do. Mr. Richards, good evening.
Yeah, and just to introduce myself, I'm Adam Richards. I'm BCP's Chief Financial Officer. So the decision record identifies the intention to fund this from the Community Infrastructure Levy. And I think within the decision record, I think it sets out clearly that we had a conversation as officers around the appropriate use of the Community Infrastructure Levy for this purpose. And because of the actual regulations themselves and the fact that we are able to use it to enhance and support CEFA infrastructure, it was seen as an appropriate use of the Community Infrastructure Levy. You will see the paper includes a challenge from Nick Perrins to the other officers around actually that holds as long as there's not any charging for the use of this asset, and assurances were obtained that that would be the intention not to do so. In actually talking about the use of Community Infrastructure Levy, it's also probably worth identifying that we did consider some other sources of funding for this. The first of that was the Tranche 5 unring-fenced MHCLG grant from government. You may recall in the budget paper that we were allocated £9.893 million for 21-22, which is intended to fund unbudgeted cost pressures in 21-22. As part of the budget, we'd allocated just over £1 million for housing and PPE. And then at the end of January, we allocated, again, just over £1 million for resort management. The judgment that actually it wasn't appropriate to use that 8.863 residual funding was the fact that we received a letter from the Department of Social Care, to the Directors of Adult Social Care from the Department of Health and Social Care, which specified very clearly that they anticipated that the large proportion of the overall 9.893 will help fund additional pressures in adult social care during 21-22. So I think it was a recognition that we'd already allocated £2 million to non-adult social care issues, and therefore we're trying to get the right balance as part of that assessment. The other assessment was actually whether it would be appropriate to use the Contained Outbreak Management Fund. This is a fund which has now reached £9 million, just over £9 million. It's from the Department of Health and Social Care, and it's specifically to support public health activity aimed at controlling the COVID-19 outbreak. This fund can only be used with the approval of the Director of Public Health. There's rigorous, regular monitoring processes. There's a very scheduled, defined activities on what it can be spent on. And I think it's fair to say it is aimed primarily at revenue expenditure, i.e. expenditure in dealing with the outbreak in the here and the now, rather than capital expenditure that you would expect over a couple of years. So it was a judgment call. And based on that judgment call, it felt appropriate, based on the weight of evidence, to use the Community Infrastructure Levy for its funding.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. I'd just like to raise one other issue before I ask Councillor Baltwick to come in. And I think I should also say the reason this is on an urgent agenda this evening was because it was requested by a member of the committee, and that to delay it further would have probably put the progress of the actual purchase process in jeopardy, maybe. And so that's why we included it as an urgent item at short notice on this agenda this evening. So I hope that makes it clear as to why we've done that. But the issue I would just like to raise is that there is a view that this is just a very, very bad idea to be putting electric barbecues on the promenade. And that actually could indeed be counterproductive, in that this idea says Bournemouth is open for barbecuing, and how it will practically reduce the number of people using disposable barbecues when they're actually banned for majority of the day is sort of questionable. And so that there is a view that this won't help particularly. there is a view also that the maintenance etc. will be significant across the numbers of barbecues, and for SIL money being used. The understanding is that revenue expenditure should not be ongoing for items purchased under the SIL scheme. So, there are a number of detailed questions under this, but I guess the fundamental one is it really a good thing to be doing, and will it work? So maybe someone would like to just comment on that view. Chief Executive, I don't know.
Yeah. I wonder if I could bring in Chris Saunders about the sort of the actual management of the service, and maybe to talk about the experience of the one that we have used with the beach lodges. Chris.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Saunders.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, barbecues was sort of something that came up time and time again in debriefs from last summer as concerns from residents, concerns from members actually, and we know that. Disposable barbecues do cause some issues, particularly around, Graham highlighted just now, particularly around fires on the cliffs occasionally, and where people tend to leave them bury them in the sand, and also sometimes bins that sort of get set on fire as well when they try to dispose of them into bins. So it's definitely an issue. Electric barbecues, we've got 5 of them already. 4 of them are down at the beach lodges at Manor Steps, albeit in a managed way, for the residents of the beach lodges, and they work really, really well. There's another one that's been on the beach on the promenade at Boscombe for about 5 years or so. Isn't massively used, but isn't massively promoted either, and it's quite standalone. And we learned some lessons in the design of that we used within the Manor Steps scheme afterwards as well. I personally have seen these in use right across Australia and New Zealand. They work really, really well as community facilities, and I'm really confident they'll be a really good addition to the seafront, not just for visitors, but as sort of facilities for local people as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Saunders. Councillor Hadley, I'm going to leave you till the members of the board have actually spoken, if you don't mind, but I am aware that your hand is up. Councillor Derek Baltwick.
Have we got any experiences withdrawn from other councils regarding on the beach? I know we talk about New Zealand and Australia, but we had one bad result when we put the reef in, when we used those 2 countries as a guide. But I don't know how you're going to put a time on everything, because some people cook quicker than others. Other people are going to get agitated because someone's taking too long. And fitting around the beach lodges doesn't really give it any idea at all. It's having your own personal barbecue like normal. And I really am really worried about it could cause trouble, because somebody will get a bad temper with somebody else. It's going to happen when crowds get together. And these youngsters who do the barbecues, most people are quite young and they're quite happy to sit right down on the water's edge just to get a better environment feeling. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Did anybody wish to comment on that, Mr. Farron? I'm
not sure there was a question. I've received it as a comment, but I know Chris did show his hand. But
Chair, if I may, where I've seen these in use, they tend to work quite communally, actually. So people tend to sort of share experience. So we're not intending to charge. They're on a timer. They turn themselves off after a few minutes. We're intending to limit the time so that they can't be used overnight, and therefore not big big communal gatherings overnight for obvious reasons. And people tend to share. They tend to share the hot plate. If I turn up with my sausages and somebody else has got it on, and a burger or whatever else is there, they tend to share it. It really doesn't cause conflict.
Thank you, Councillor Vicky-Slade, please.
Chairman, could I also make a comment on that, if I may? As I've used them on the beach at Boscombe, and as Mr. Saunders has said, they are used very much communally, with people coming in and using them, and the button takes it off, and there's no issue at all. I mean, I have found that people were using those in the area around Boscombe rather than bringing in and lighting their own disposable barbecues. There were several people who came in, saw them, and then left their own disposable ones without.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Vicky Slade, please.
Thank you. I've got a whole series of concerns about this. I'm relieved that no one's trying to use COVID money for this, because that would be a complete dereliction of everything, because it's not relevant. I'm horrified we're using SIL. You know, why is it that if somebody wants a zebra crossing, it has to come from their neighbourhood pot, or they want a piece of park equipment, it has to come from this, and yet this is coming from strategic. This isn't strategic at all. And the suggestion that I've seen that there's one mention of strategic SIL in the document that Bill Cotton wrote before he left us, which was that strategic SIL should be spent on much needed infrastructure. I do not know anybody who has put out and said the much needed infrastructure we need in BCP is 27 barbecue plates along certain beaches when we have over 200 zebra crossings that the community desperately want, when we've got parks to deal with. We're keeping some of our disabled toilets closed and we're not providing deck chairs, but we do think it's okay to spend 350,000 on some barbecues. So I can't see the need. I'm worried about the food safety. I don't think you can compare New Zealand and Australia. They don't leave their beaches in the disgusting state that the public left our beaches in Bournemouth last year. So I don't buy the collegiate thing. Beach lodges is a totally separate, you know, that is a community of itself. It's managed, they manage each other. Someone from the public isn't going to wander up to those barbecues. So I don't think you can compare them. I don't understand the urgency. If you know, surely when you start investigating this, you find out what the lead time is and you plan accordingly. To do this under urgency powers, because there's only one supplier that can get it done for us in time, and to make the decision at the end of March when Easter is this week and we've got to dig up the promenade to put in electric all the way along. Oh my goodness, that's just madness. Why are we doing it? Why is it so urgent? And if it was so important, why didn't this process start at Christmas? The decision impact assessment is completely leading. It talks about, in the transport one, it talks about this is going to stop people going elsewhere. No, it's not. We're not banning disposable barbecues. In fact, I'm just looking on the website. Let's all go to Bournemouth. Let's go out Bournemouth and Poole. There's a lovely picture of people barbecuing on the sand, and it says we can barbecue anywhere apart from Hamworthy Park and Lake Pier from 6 p.m. till 11 p.m. So people are still going to be barbecuing. Unless this comes in conjunction with a ban on disposable barbecues, which there's nothing in here to do, I can't see how it solves the problem. I don't think it's appropriate spend of SIL. I didn't see anything about who decides what is appropriate spend of SIL. A year ago, I was asking the head of economic growth and infrastructure to say, we need a 1, 2, 3 list. We need to know what is appropriate infrastructure and what is not. And the document that came out in December literally says much needed infrastructure. That's not strategic. And I just, this to me is completely, it's the wrong thing at the wrong time, the wrong process. And having one supplier means that we're beholden to these people. And doing 27 in one go, or ordering for 27 in one go, that's mad as well. Completely mad.
Thank you, Councillor Slade. I see Councillor Iyengar has got your hand up. Did you want to respond to that?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Just if I may. Why now? Because summer's about to start. Because we want them in for summer. That's when they'll be used the most. Why wasn't the idea discussed earlier at Christmas? Well, in a sense, the idea from being the new administration coming in and from dealing with some immediate things in the early first few months, the idea came up fairly recently to move on the idea, and it's as simple as that. And then, of course, the tightness of the window to have them in for summer.
which I hope will be understood by members of the group. Disposable barbecues, interesting. Brighton, I've actually been in touch with my counterpart there. There's a limited ban there. Other councils around the country in general have not banned them, okay, despite the national feeling that we hear about, we must ban them and so on. They're not being banned because my take on that is because it's a mixed picture. And there's a lot of people who come, they use them. Disposable barbecues are cheap, which of course is a two-sided coin because they're cheap. It represents a sort of a modest, cheap day out for people. But equally, we have the downside of the litter and the hazard that's created by it. But I think we have to be careful before we undertake a view to ban disposable barbecues. I'm not saying we'll never do it because it's a very, very live issue. I was going to say a hot issue, but that's a terrible joke this time of the evening. But it's a live issue and we do want to take this seriously and keep that under review. But the idea, which I think and I will promote, is that this idea of having the fixed barbecues is a way of actually encouraging people to their use rather than bringing their own disposable barbecue. And we're going to test it. We're going to see what happens. And I don't quite see what's so wrong with that in this. The appropriate spend of SIL, and it's not strategic, please the ones. And just because this is different, and maybe it's not in the traditional idea of a strategic meaning a very large building or a brand new road, there's not just a narrow definition of what is strategic here. Strategic can mean infrastructure, it can mean equipment, it can mean common use facilities. And I think I've been, in the limited time I've been in council and public service, I've seen the definition widen of what is SIL. Now I do understand the mood of this, which is there may be raised eyebrows about the use of SIL for this. Totally understood. And I imagine many of my colleagues will understand the, oh, crikey, this is a bit different, this sort of use of SIL. But please, it is different. I do recognise that. But what I wouldn't accept is an attack on it because of it doesn't fit the normal definition of what we use for SIL. I've been involved in the last 2 rounds of SIL. I've seen enough sort of breaching of the traditional definitions of what we're using SIL money for. And often it is for good purpose and it's for things that are really appreciated. Thank you. Why one? We're not beholden to one supplier. That's manifestly not true. We'll start with one. We'll see how we go, see how it works and so on. And why get 27 in one go? Because it's the start of summer. Thank you, Chairman.
Come back, please, Chair. Chair, you're on mute. Is it okay? Yes. Can you come back? I just want to come back and say I'm not saying that we should ban disposable barbecues. We looked at it last year. Mr. Saunders will recall us talking about it and saying that actually that could be really damaging to people who don't have a garden. So I'm not suggesting that we ban disposable barbecues. What I'm saying is that doing this without a corresponding ban on using them on the beach means you're not actually solving the problem you're seeking to solve. My confusion around, we'll have to agree to disagree on what strategic SIL, and Mr. Perrins and I have had many conversations, and I'm still not satisfied that we should be leaving this up in the air, especially when there's the Futures Fund as well that's also for infrastructure. But how can you say you're testing it when you're going to do 27? If you were testing it, what you'd do is you'd put in 5, because I noticed there's a phasing in the maps, but you've got an order for 27, £179,000 worth of spend. Why not buy a few, see how it goes this year, and then move on in future? That doesn't sound to me like a test. So my understanding of that is quite different. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Slade. Could I bring in Councillor Tony O'Neill, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I've got 3 of them. I understand the rationale for using SIL money for infrastructure as explained. I have a different complication when it comes to the ongoing operating costs, which will be a consistent drain on SIL monies unless there is another intention, because I understand that the electrical supply, once installed, will be met by SIL monies. So that's one question. given ongoing operating costs, why is it free? And also, what consideration have been given to the health and safety issues that might arise from hot working? And also, what steps are going to be taken once installed to protect against theft of these barbecues? Will there be cameras in situ to keep an eye on? And the last one is on Sandbanks, which is certainly known to several councillors. There have been complaints about beach barbecuing, hot coals left on the beach and spread through the sand whilst it cools down, so much so that it actually denies seating in a number of areas, melted bins. If we are to put barbecues into Sandbanks, should we not seriously question the on-beach barbecuing, which has led to a number of other problems? Thank you, Chairman. You're muted, Chairman.
Yes, sorry, I was just trying to find me. Yeah, Mr. Saunders, could you answer that?
I can try, Chairman. The issue around why they're free, really there's a couple of issues around that. One is because we're trying to encourage the use of them, so therefore we reduce the use of disposable barbecues. And secondly, because my instinct at this moment in time is that it would cost us as much, if not more, to secure the cash and collect the cash and reconcile the cash than it would be to than it would make. So happy to review that, but that's sort of the current position. In terms of the sort of the safety elements of it, we will risk assess them. We've got risk assessments in place, obviously, for the ones we've currently got. There are ongoing issues with safety on them. They heat up and cool down very quickly, and I don't have a particular issue with that. I'm not sure what the question was around Sandbanks, I have to say. So maybe
the question about Sandbanks was really, there have been complaints about hot coals left on the beach, denying an area of beach usage. People either leave the barbecues or spread them out on the beach, or they put them in the plastic bin, which then melts. Really asking the question of having both opportunities available on an ongoing basis. And the other two questions were really to do with the risk of theft of the barbecues. How's that going to be protected? And also the ongoing operating costs being funded by SIL monies.
Okay.
Chair,
the ongoing.
Sorry, if I can just come in, it's Adam Richards. If I can just come in on that first or that last question, which is actually Tony's first question, just to highlight the fact that the ongoing operational costs will not be funded from SIL. I need to be absolutely clear about that. The ongoing operational costs will be funded by the service, and the service has made an assessment around those costs as to what they potentially could be, and are happy to absorb that cost within their overall operational arrangements.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Richards. Mr. Saunders, do you want to carry on?
Yes, sure. The Sandbanks issue, I mean, Sandbanks is at this moment in time anyway, so I'm not sure that's entirely relevant. I think it's on the sort of the next phase. Should we do that at some stage? So, yeah, and I think the point was made about it avoiding melting bins. Apologies, Councillor, I can't remember what the second point was.
It was about the security of the barbecues to avoid theft, and whether there will be any cameras in the area overlooking the area, both for health and safety reasons, also for theft reasons.
Sorry, thank you for reminding me. Where the sort of first phase where there are cameras right the way through there anyway, already there. These are ordinary pieces of street furniture, extraordinary pieces of street furniture, but they will be put in as pieces of street furniture. Somebody's got to go to quite an effort to remove them, given that generally there's no access by vehicle. So I'm not anticipating there'll be an issue. I'm not saying there will never be an issue, but I'm not anticipating there'll be an issue.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Ianga, did you want to speak?
Yes, thank you. A very quick comment. Thank you, Chairman. Just on Sandbanks residents, Councillor May Haynes and I were ward councillors for Sandbanks, as is well known, and we're well in touch with the residents there about their concerns about barbecues. Actually, their concern about barbecues predates the whole discussion about electric barbecues on the beach. It's generally about the siting of the barbecue area specifically next to a residential block in particular, and about something to do with the sand dune, about moving the barbecue area. And actually, in one sense, the electric barbecues may help the situation by moving it to a more central area that is less sensitive for the residents there. But as Chris has already said, it's not been decided as to whether or not Sandbanks will have a barbecue and where it will be sited. So that's an ongoing discussion, and we're well in touch with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Iyengar. There are a number of councillors lining up to speak on this issue. So what I'd like to do, if possible, is to let everybody ask their questions and then get responses from the team gathered here. So if that's okay, otherwise we are going to be here all night. So I'm going to ask for Councillor Mark Howell if he could put his questions, please. And if somebody could just note.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Well, it's there might be some questions in here, but there's also, my view as well. I mean, I just think this is crazy, really. Why now? Why are we encouraging communal barbecuing in a COVID environment? That seems crazy for a start. And the time when we're going to be overloaded with visitors. I mean, this year is not the time we need to worry about people visiting. All the hotels booked up. We know it's going to be manic. We have time to think about this properly. In terms of is it the right thing to do? I just think somebody's come up with this idea in the administration and got excited about it and is running with it. But I can't see that it's going to be popular amongst the public. I mean, people walking along the promenade, all these barbecues along the promenade, they're going to be encouraging crowding along the promenade. They're going to expose people who are walking on the promenade to the smell of barbecuing. I eat meat. I don't like walking around other people's barbecues and smelling that meat. What about all the people that don't eat meat who are going to be exposed to that? We're also encouraging the consumption of meat, aren't we? Which is not something that is not good for climate change, nor is burning, barbecuing in this environment. And also, why do we want people to come and barbecue on the beach anyway? Because they're not spending any money in any of the outlets. They're coming from a cheap day out. They're probably using their cars probably to get to the beach, again polluting the place. So what is the value? And then we're spending still money, which has been pointed out could much more be sensibly used elsewhere. And then is it going to work to stop the barbecuing? The disposable barbecue, yes, perhaps a bit, but lots of people who barbecue want to be near the water with their friends who are going in the water, and they don't know that the electric barbecues are going to be free, so they might not know about the barbecues. They all go to a place where they are. So I still think there'll be considerable use of disposable barbecues, and as Councillor Slade says, what we really need is a bylaw banning the use of disposable barbecues. I mean, Councillor Iyengar is normally very good at presenting these items and does his research very well, and I'm in general mostly supportive of what he does, but he doesn't sound particularly confident on this one, and I wonder whether this has originated somewhere else. I think if we're looking at leisure and well-being as we should be, why aren't we putting more fitness equipment along the beach? Why aren't we encouraging people, selling ourselves as a place where people should come and be healthy? The beach should be a place to, beach tennis is a new thing that is emerging on the beach now, but there's lots of other activities that could be put on which would be healthy. And I just think this is the administration be shooting itself in the foot, and I think that reflects badly on all the councillors as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. You've raised an awful number of lot of points there. But I'm going to move on to Councillor Millie Earl and see whether she's got to add to that list.
Thank you, Chair. I was listening, and there are a few new things, I think. Obviously, as a scrutiny committee, our job is to look at risk, and I think that there really is a gamble here. You know, we don't know what it will be like in our context. I think our beach differs a lot from other beaches, not just across the country, but across the world. We don't know what it's going to be like. Like Councillor Slade said, this is 27 barbecues and it's 350k, and describing that as a test really worries me. And it begs the question, what's the vision? Like, what are we testing for? If the test fails, are they just going to be taken out? And so, you know, I just want to know, you know, why are we testing and what is the proposed result of that? My next concern is about installation. So as we get towards the summer season, obviously the prom's going to get very busy. People still need to be able to social distance, and that sort of disruption, I'd like to know how that might impact on people visiting and how we use the prom. My biggest concern, I think, is about evidence, saying that they reduce the risk of disposable barbecues. I can't see anything in the paper that says that that's been the case in other places, apart from anecdotal evidence. I think a big decision like this needs to really have that evidence base to back it up, so that we can make informed decisions before spending that amount of money. And my final question is actually for you, Chair, which is more about the process of this scrutiny. So this is an officer decision, and I'd like to know, perhaps from you or from the monitoring officer, what our options are as a committee to make recommendations on this. Thank you.
Yeah, the last one is a very interesting one, because the decision has been made. There is no provision that I'm aware of for changing that. I don't think there's a formal process for that, but maybe I could just call on the monitoring officer if she's there. If you could just give us a quick word on that before we go on to Councillor Lewis Allison. Thank you. Are you there?
Yes,
thank you.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Yes, I am here. There is no, well, scrutiny can always only make recommendations back to Cabinet. This matter is not subject to call-in, it's an officer decision. But I'm sure the Cabinet will hear any recommendations Scrutiny might want to refer back to it, but Scrutiny is not able to overturn the decision or change it in any way.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Councillor Lewis Allison.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I share a lot of the concerns that the councillors have raised, to be honest. I think if the goal here is to try and make the barbecues that are being used on the beach, the disposable ones, safer, then there are other options. For example, there aren't anywhere where you could safely dispose of disposable barbecues on the beach, really. There aren't any suitable bins for coals or for anything that's hot. Most of the bins are plastic, so they're not suitable. I think there would be a lot of public support around getting rid of barbecues. In fact, I think members of the Tory administration, when we were in administration, raised that point and tried to push for the barbecues to be banned, as they have been under New Forest District Council. I'm also really concerned about food contamination and food safety. Are we going to be, as Mark was pointing out, people are going to be cooking meat on them. So is there going to be any facilities for people who are vegetarian to use them? Is there going to be any consideration of different meat contaminants on the same grill, so pork versus beef, etc.? I think there's a lot of issues there. I'm not sure what we can do in terms of what you've just said, from what we've just heard from the monitoring officer. If we can't make recommendations on this item, we're sort of at a loss, really. They're going to go ahead without any difference that we talk about here, are they?
Thank you, Councillor Allison. Actually, the monitoring officer said, yes, we can make recommendations to Cabinet on this matter if we wish to. We can't overturn the decision, but we can make a recommendation if we wish to. And if anybody is minded to do that, and judging by some of the comments we've had already, it sounds like somebody may be minded to, and if they'd like to think about what you might like to recommend, if you could work on it so that we can, when we get to that point, if and when we get to that point, we've got something to show you. Councillor Kieran Wilson, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's really rare that me and my ward colleague, Councillor Baltwick, share concerns, but I think that just shows kind of the level of confusion at this decision. I'm going to try and add some new things to the debate. Firstly, I think, you know, Mr. Saunders spoke about sharing, it being communal and sharing the food. I would like to just remind the committee and people in general and the administration that we're in the middle of a pandemic. We don't know what tomorrow is going to hold. We don't know. We're hoping, obviously, that everything's going to be normal by the 21st of June, but that is by no means any guarantee. So I would like to understand what kind of infection measures are going to be there, because sharing food on a barbecue is a big risk during a pandemic. I mean, to give an example of this, I watch Premier League football, and in between half-time in games, these people are in a COVID-secure bubble, but the ball's still being disinfected, the crossbars are still being disinfected, everything is being taken through a measured kind of way. So food sharing seems very, very risky in these times. And then my second point is understanding where this idea has actually come from, because I have not, in my 26 years as a Bournemouth resident and my 3 years as a councillor, I've never had a conversation with anybody saying that we need electric barbecues on the beach. That's just not a topic that's ever come up. And I'm not sure that they're going to be very popular. So I'd just like to understand, is there going to be any form of consultation with the public and where the ideas come from? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Kelsey.
Yeah, I'm actually coming on here with full of trepidation now, Chairman, because I think I might be the only person on here that actually supports this by the sounds of things. I think the idea of barbecues on the beach is years past when it should have happened, The concerns people seem to be having about other people using them, if I'm going to use one, I think I'd make sure it was clean enough for me to be happy to use it. I wouldn't necessarily rely on someone else to do it. I have the fortunate position of being an adult, and I'm able to make decisions for myself. And if I don't think something is clean enough, then I won't use it. If I wanted it cleaner, I would clean it myself. We can do so much for the members of the public, Chairman, but we can't hold their hands 24/7. We have to allow them to make some choices for themselves. If they want to use one, they will use it. If they don't want to, they won't. I'm sure that Seafront Services will have enough signage around all of these to say, you know, make sure it's clean. I believe that they are going to be responsible for cleaning them throughout the day anyway. So I think we have to allow people to make some choices. And the thought of banning the portable barbecues is something I would cut my hands off before I said yes to it. Some people cannot afford to go and eat in the seafront facilities that we have. So the full barbecue is a nice, sometimes cheaper option for a lot of our families that live around the conurbation. So I don't think we can take that chance away from them. I would like to ask Mr. Saunders one question with regards to these barbecues, and that is, are they actually coal ones or are they the hot plate style? Because that does minimise sometimes on the smell of cooking food that takes place on these. So that's a question I'd just like to answer, but I do support having these barbecues on the beach.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Councillor Kelsey. They're hot plates. They're not coals.
Good.
Councillor Andy Hadley, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I actually, I mean, in principle, in an ordinary time, I think a free facility like this is great, and I'd love to support it, but we're not in ordinary times. And I think that what this is doing is creating congestion hotspots. And if you look at the maps of where these are located, they're mostly located right by access points where people are coming down onto the promenade. You've also got things like the land train. You've got obviously outside July and August, you've got cycles going along as well. And so we're creating places where we're encouraging people to create gaggles around these sites. So I think it's creating congestion hotspots at locations that are already busy. Now, I know that Hamworthy Park is included and also Muddyford Spit and Muddyford Quay. But if I was putting these in right now, I'd be putting them in places that are away from the seafront. I'd be putting them in other parks to encourage people to use other open spaces rather than our most busy open spaces. So I think that's, it's completely the wrong place for me. Use of sill I object to hugely. It's about the impact of new developments. It's being paid for by the people who are buying into those new developments, and do they want to buy an electric barbecue significantly away from them that's going to be busy, full of tourists? It should be paid for by the tourists, as far as I'm concerned. And the other one is about likely lifetime of the asset. So it's interesting that Chris mentioned that the existing one's been going for 5 years. I wouldn't expect them with the Saltaire to last that long. But a lot of still is being spent on zebra crossings and other things that are far more enduring than this sort of thing. So I think that's a real problem for me. But I think otherwise, people have mentioned everything. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hadley. I believe the one at Boscombe is actually unserviceable. Councillor Leslie Dedman.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I need some clarification off that last speaker, because I understood they're not going to be in Christchurch, which was going to be exactly what I was going to say. So can I have clarification? They are not on Muddyford Quay, and they're not on, no, because I think I've had this conversation with Chris before, and my question was, why are we left out of the barbecues? Because I'm the only one that is thinking what a good idea it would be, because I would very much like to ban the sort that burn your dog's feet when you go on the beach, and obviously we can't unless we have these electric ones. I totally understand what everybody is saying about the sill money, about the funding, about the way it's being done, but in general I think it's a jolly nice idea, and I think it's a shame that Christchurch aren't having them. So that is, Chairman, basically what I want to say. But having said that, I won't make a fuss about it, Chris. We've already had this conversation. So yeah, but no, in another year, perhaps we will get them when the pandemic is over.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dedman. Councillor Tony, if you've got one very quick point, because I think you've spoken already.
Yeah, it's a recommendation, actually. There's been a lot of debate. A lot of it's been about the sill monies and the operating issue. I asked several questions where I understood the answers. I understand the emotion behind a lot of it as well. I was going to make a recommendation that we support the proposal on the basis that it will be reviewed in 12 months' time. We won't know unless we trial. And if we're happy to take that forward, that we support it on the basis of 12 months trial and take a vote on it.
Thank you, Councillor O'Neill. I certainly wouldn't want to support that, because I wouldn't want to trial £370,000 worth of capital expenditure on the thought that we may not actually want it at the end of the trial. But I would like now to come back to officers, if I may, who've heard, this really is a Marmite decision, and you either hate it or you don't. And a lot of very good points well made there. And the one that's come out for me is, what is the value? Why are we actually doing this? What is the value? Is it because of safety reasons for disposing the pub, or is it to attract visitors to the town, just to provide an additional facility? What is the value? What is the real reason behind doing this? And I think it's probably fair to say that when things are introduced at this pace, even councillors don't like change sometimes, and there's a kind of human reaction to it. It's coming in so quickly. It's going in. The funding route is not quite what we would expect, and so there's a kind of nervousness about the way the decision has been made, which compounds the nervousness about what we're actually going to be doing as well. So anyway, perhaps Mr. Fran, I don't know if you want to kick off in responding to a lot of those points that have been made, and well made as well, I think.
Thank you, Chairman. There are a number of points in there, and clearly some valid points and valid arguments, and I guess the debate comes down to which side do you rest on of the fence in terms of that decision. And in terms of the COVID environment, of course, these with the delivery times, etc., won't be installed and up and running. The earliest we could do it, I think, is late May. Actually, 21st of June is probably a more likely date for them to be operational from, or thereabouts. So that I think some of those COVID arguments will be different then, should be different then on the current planning. I'll leave Chris to pick up some of the operational things. The committee process, I think you have dealt with, and of course the spread and geographical locations. The ones that are being proposed are really a mix of places where we think there'll be demand, but also a combination of where the electrical supply already exists or is easy to connect to. So I think all those have been taken into account in the locations. I wonder whether colleagues want to come in, or I know Councillor Anger has got his hand up. I wonder whether if the councillors want to go first, then the officers pick up any points that they need to.
Fine. Councillor Anger, do you want to come in?
Sorry, that was an old hand, Chair. Forgive me.
Come in. I don't blame you. Leave it to the officers.
That's more than happy to speak, Chair. I just didn't have my hand up.
It is an officer decision, so let's leave it to them. Okay. Mr. Saunders, did you want to pick up on some of the operational type questions that have been asked?
I can try, Chair. I was busy noting them down, so hopefully I've picked most of them up. In terms of what's the value of doing it, I think, which is your question, it's really about sort of reducing risk in terms of fire and in terms of melted bins and all those sorts of things. So it's reduce the risk and reduce the nuisance. Obviously, it's a good community facility as well. Why aren't they in Christchurch at this moment in time, and why aren't they some of the other sites? Simply because power is the limiting factor, and getting power to them is the key issue, and the power in those sites is more limited than some of the areas that we're talking about. That's simply the only sort of the only issue at the moment. We talked installation. There was a question about installation and how we would put them in. We're doing works all the time through the seafront, whatever it is. We try to avoid big works in the peak months for obvious reasons. This isn't really big works. It will be, and we will try to sort of minimise any impact as much as we possibly can. So I'm fairly confident these are quite local installations and they shouldn't be too intrusive. Councillor Allison, I think, made a point about bins, about coal bins, and he's right. We could have and perhaps should have more of those right the way through. They're not cheap either, but they are available. So maybe something to have a look at. There was also an issue around sort of food safety, and I just want to be clear that I wasn't suggesting that people shared food, although you're more than welcome to, I suppose, to share food. It was more about sort of sharing the hot plate. I just want to make that clear. I mean, I hope I've picked up the majority of the issues there. I would be happy to if anybody's got any particular individual burning questions. Sorry, that was a bad pun. I'm more than happy to. I wasn't intended either. I was more than happy to take them offline and supply some sort of FAQs if that helps.
Thank you, Mr. Saunders. Councillor Iyengar and then Councillor Anderson, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd probably just like to say something, just to summarise a few of the points I've heard from tonight's discussion. And I do appreciate the views. I also do appreciate, sort of, because of the topic it is and the way it's come across, probably some of the reaction it's got this evening. The timing, why now? It's the start of summer. I think we've covered that one. Is it strategic? Sometimes it's in the eye of the beholder. I please, with respect, I defy anybody to put a firm description on what strategic is. Is it an asset of community use? Undoubtedly it is. It's probably not typically the kind of thing that we think of when we think of an asset of, normal, traditional, community use, but it is a community use asset. And tourists will use it, but residents will use it as well, considerably, and I hope they do. Why now? The question came up earlier. Is it the right time to do it in view of COVID? Without meaning to be glib, without meaning to be glib, outdoor transmission of COVID is not seen to be the source of the problem for COVID. Okay, and let me link that to the point about disposable barbecues. I will maintain as a position that even though we are not currently banning the disposal of disposable barbecues, because it's quite a complex picture, we do expect that a number of people will use these electric barbecues, these fixed installations, in a more controlled way with the benefit to litter and so on, rather than using their disposable barbecues. And we will see, because please, we cannot know exactly what the effect will be there, but I think it's worth a trial, and I will stake my reputation on this is worth a trial. It's worth going for to see. Do they work? They work elsewhere. Please, let's not dismiss that out of hand. I think there's been, what I found disappointing in tonight's discussion, if I can speak like that, is that there's been, oh yes, let's ignore the fact that they work elsewhere. They work here for all these reasons. Please, other places in the world have gone through this learning cycle and have probably gone through a similar discussion that we've gone through tonight, by the way, with all the dissenting voices. And they've gone through all of that, they put them in place, and by golly, they work. Okay, so that encourages me to take a chance with these and just see, let's see what happens. It's a controlled way of putting these in and seeing what happens. Okay, the final thing is that will it mean that people will come, they're barbecuing and they're eating and they're not contributing towards the economy, they're not helping at all? Well, no, how can we say that? Actually, people will be buying locally. People will still be buying their drinks. People will be staying here for longer, as per my earlier conversation about people coming for longer and staying for more days and so on and so forth. This is an encouragement for tourists to come to stay for longer, for residents to have more of an experience on our seafront as well. I don't accept that economically this is a setback for us at all. So I really would like more people on this group to sort of take this idea in the spirit in which it's come, even though it's come with a certain sort of urgency. Maybe it's come maybe in a sort of a not quite a sort of a the sort of the relaxed process-led way that we're used to with items in BCP Council. It's come in a more sort of urgent way than that, but nonetheless look at the merits of the idea and look at the spirit in which it's been presented and just give it a chance. And that's what I'd ask people. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Iyengar. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to speak on one specific issue, but before I do that, I would just say that I do agree with what Councillor Iyengar has said, and I support his comments entirely. But the area I wanted to talk about was the fact that as cleansing and waste, we are having to put on extra staff to handle the potential of having coals from unburnt barbecues appearing at the household waste recycling centres and stopping fire. So we're actually having to cover and prepare for the standard, traditional, whatever you want to call them, barbecues at our tips. And if we can encourage anyone to use an electric barbecue and not use a charcoal barbecue, I'm all in favour for it, because it's going to save my staff or environment staff time and money and energy by not having to be there.
Thank you very much. There are no more hands up. I think we've had a really good debate on this matter. Now, Councillor O'Neill did table a motion just now, recommendation, and I'd just like to point out that I think all we can do is make a recommendation to the portfolio holder and officers in a formal way, but I don't think we can make a formal recommendation to Cabinet because there's no statutory requirement to make a response in that way. But if anybody does want to make a recommendation or comment to the portfolio holder or officers on this decision, then please do so. And I'll now come back to Councillor O'Neill, who did actually want to make a kind of a recommendation. And I just wondered, do you still want to make that recommendation? And if so, do you have anybody that will second it?
Yeah, I'm happy to make that recommendation. Unless we trial it, measure it and understand it, we're not going to understand the answer. So I think my recommendations would stand if anybody wants to second it. Thank you.
I'll second it, Chairman.
Councillor Dave Kelsey wants to second that. Okay.
Chairman, could I just ask, if I may, that added on to that, could I just ask that as much information regarding safety and use of these facilities is displayed within the vicinity as clearly and if necessary, maybe in more than one language, bearing in mind the amount of non-English speaking people we have that come to the beaches, and we encourage them to come here and use them. So I'd like to make sure that there is enough safety notices around for people that will be using them, and contact numbers for who to contact in case of emergencies.
Certainly, I can tell you the one that's installed at Boscombe has very clear signage in the use of the equipment. It's not, but it's not in foreign languages, I have to say. Councillor Mark Howell, did you want to comment on the recommendation that?
Yes, I'm just a bit confused because Councillor O'Neill is asking essentially for a trial, but it seems like he's not amending the number of barbecues. So how could it be a trial if we're introducing everything that was intended to be introduced, and paying for it? It's not like we can hand the things back. I'm a bit confused.
Okay, so we can overcome this confusion. Councillor O'Neill, can you be very specific, and so we can actually see what the recommendation is? Maybe you could just write it down in the message bar so we can all see it. I'll tell you what, I think if you want to do that, I'm just wondering if anybody wants a comfort break. We could take 5 minutes there because it's probably an opportune moment whilst that is being prepared, and maybe Councillor Kelsey wants to discuss that as well, as to make sure you're in agreement on what's being recommended. Councillor Howe, is your hand up again? No answer. Okay, so if you would do that, can we just take 5 minutes? We'll come back at 8:05. Quick comfort break. Yeah. Welcome back to the Overview and Scrutiny Board members and also members of the public. Okay, we got to the point where Councillor O'Neill had made a recommendation and that had been seconded by Councillor David Kelsey. The recommendation is that we trial as intended with a measurement and report back at year end. Is there any dissent to that recommendation? I can't see any dissent there. Ah, yes, there is one against. Yeah, okay. Are we going to take a vote on this then, please, Democratic Services?
Okay, thank you, Chairman. I'll just run through everyone's names then, please. Could you respond with a for, against or abstain?
Thank you.
Councillor Bartlett?
Against.
Councillor O'Neill?
For.
Councillor Allison?
Against.
Councillor Borthwick? Councillor Brooke?
Against.
Councillor Dedman?
Abstain.
Councillor Dion?
For.
Councillor Earl?
Against.
Councillor Edwards?
Abstain.
Councillor Farr?
For.
Councillor Fear?
For.
Councillor Howell?
Against.
Councillor Kelsey?
For.
Councillor Slade?
Against.
Councillor Wilson?
Against.
Chairman, that's 6 for, 7 against and 2 abstentions. Chairman, sorry, you're muted.
Sorry, that motion is therefore not carried. Correct?
Yes, Chairman.
Okay. Members, does anybody have any other recommendations? Councillor Earl.
Yes, I do. I will just put it into the chat now. It's purely to ask for a slightly reduced scheme of a limited number of barbecues. So it is actually a trial, which can then be re-evaluated further down the line. So I think it gives the ability to see what, you know, to look at all of our concerns and see if they were valid or not. So it should be a nice compromise. So I'll just put it in there now.
Thank you, Councillor. Before we do that, can I just ask officers if it's too late? Has the order been placed? It's already been placed.
Chair, just to say, the order's been placed for the barbecues. The order has not been placed yet for the power. And in terms of value, it's about half and half.
Okay, well, in light of that, Councillor Earl, would you like to reconsider your recommendation?
Well, I mean, is it? Can you ring them up and say, hang on a minute? So I don't know. I would very much like for this to be the recommendation of the committee, if they agree with that, just so it's on record that some people did not feel this way about this decision.
Okay.
I think, Chair, in terms of the process, I think that's perfectly fine. The committee can pass that resolution and then we can take it away and see what we can do outside of that. So I think that there's no harm in that.
Okay, thank you. Is anybody there going to second this recommendation? Councillor Brooke has indicated. So the recommendation, and this is to the portfolio holders and officers, it's not to Cabinet. I want to make that quite clear. This committee recommends the purchase of 6 double barbecues at 3 locations for summer 2021 to evaluate risks identified. This will then be reviewed in October 2021 in terms of expansion to phase 2 in 2022. That's been proposed by Milieu, seconded by Councillor Mike Brooke. We take a vote on that, please. Claire?
Sorry, Chairman. Sorry, call it if you could just vote for, against, or let me know if you're abstaining. Councillor Bartlett.
Against.
Councillor O'Neill.
Against.
Councillor Allison.
For.
Councillor Borthwick. Sorry, was that for, Councillor Borthwick?
Oh, yeah.
Councillor Brooke.
For.
Councillor Dedman.
For.
Councillor Dion.
Against.
Councillor Earl.
For.
Councillor Edwards.
Against.
Councillor Farr.
Against.
Councillor Fear.
Abstain.
Councillor Howell.
For.
Councillor Kelsey.
Against.
Councillor Slade.
For.
Councillor Wilson.
For.
Chairman, that's 8 in favour, 6 against and 1 abstention.
So say again, 8 for.
8 yes.
8 for and
6 against.
6 against. So that motion is carried. And I think, unless anybody else has got anything else to say, that brings us to the end of this debate. Any dissent from that?
I've had my hand up for a while, Chair.
Oh, what a surprise, Councillor Howell. Would you like to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. I don't think that tone of voice is necessarily appropriate.
Sorry, just put me to surprise.
But I would, you know, I think you know, we need to say something to the cabinet about the fact that these barbecues have already been purchased and our time has essentially been wasted here, it seems. You know, what the fact that this, I just don't understand how this can be treated as an urgent decision, because the only reason it's urgent is because the administration has obviously just made a late decision or delayed their decision. It's not something that is essential to the operation of the council or delivery of services to the public. How are we going? We're just being bounced into this decision and it not being given an appropriate opportunity to scrutinise this. It's just not right.
Okay, thank you. You've made that point. Are there any recommendations, further recommendations that you would like to raise for the portfolio holder or officers that have made this decision?
Are you speaking to me, Director?
Yes, yes, I am. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to, if I'd be happy for you to informally state that at cabinet, but if you want that put down formally, I'll write it down.
Well, this is this is an officer decision. This is not a cabinet item. You know, the decision has been made. If we need to we need to make the point to officers and the portfolio holder here, not the cabinet. So,
but it doesn't seem like it's an officer decision, given the weight of cabinet members being put behind it.
Councillor Vicky Slade, did you want to come in on this? So I can't hear you.
Sorry, I wonder, Councillor Bartlett, whether I accept that this is apparently an officer decision. I accept it was signed off as an officer decision. That's how the system works. I think there needs to be an urgent scrutiny of how strategic SIL decisions are made and what constitutes an urgent decision. If we had suffered a massive tidal wave that had taken out the facilities on the beachfront and therefore we needed to urgently replace the toilets or something, that would be an urgent decision. A decision made because, oh my goodness, we didn't order them in time and now we've got one company that provides them and it's got to be done urgently. That's bad planning, isn't it? So I think we need to scrutinise the process around urgent decision making and the allocation of strategic SIL funding. If anything comes out of this fiasco, that should come out of it.
Okay, but I think that point, in terms of the decision making, it can be made to people that are here this evening, because they are the people empowered and have actually taken that decision. So this concern is around the process that they have used. We can make that point to them this evening. It doesn't have to go to Cabinet. So if you have a recommendation you want to make to those officers that have made that decision within the framework that we have, you can make it, and you can make it now.
Well, my recommendation, Chair, is to you that we add to our workflow a scrutiny of this process, because to me that is where this has gone wrong. I'd be happy, and it's a very simple recommendation but I don't know if a recommendation to you needs to go in writing, or whether it's something that you can add to our work plan.
Yes, I am happy to do that, but I have to say that it probably comes under audit and governance more than overview and scrutiny. But it's something I'm very happy to put on the forward plan, and I could refer it, I'm sure, to audit and governance as well. And we can decide where it best sits. And I'm happy to take that action.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, I've actually made that recommendation in the sidebar there.
And Councillor Slade, I do happen to agree with you also. So hang on a minute, I need to look at this. Recommend a referral to Audit and Governance Committee to review urgent decision-making powers. Yeah, I think that's fine. I'm not sure we even need to take a vote on that. I think we can do it anyway. So if you're happy for me to take that as an action, I can do that.
I think it would be good to have a vote on it because it's to express the will of the committee.
Yeah, okay. I'm happy to second it.
Okay, all right, we'll have a vote on it. Democratic Services, could we?
Chair, I've got my hand up.
Oh, sorry. Hang on. Derek Baltwick. Sorry.
I think this is democracy gone out the window. I was voted to do my residents their wishes, and I'm sure we're going to get penalised in the press that the officers have made this decision. You're not talking about 350 quid. This is a lot of money. I could build a few houses for that, and I think it's against democracy. I can't believe it's happening, quite frankly, in a Conservative-led council. I can't believe it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Baltwick. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that are these urgent powers or are they emergency powers?
I believe the decision was taken under the emergency powers delegated to Chief Executive.
I think that it would be appropriate for that wording, probably emergency powers.
Oh, I see. In the recommendation itself, to review emergency decision-making powers rather than urgent.
Yeah, because I think there's a distinct difference from my point of view. This cannot be considered as an emergency, but that's what the powers it was under, I believe. So
could I bring the monitoring officer in, please? I'm not sure, within our wherewithal to actually change emergency because it's a matter of national legislation. But could I ask for a comment from monitoring officer, please?
Yes, Chair, certainly. So until Council agreed to change the Constitution a week or so ago, we had two sets of urgency powers in the Constitution, one which was brought about by the COVID arrangements and a special urgency power. We've never had something called an emergency power, but special urgency powers were put into the Constitution under the COVID decision-making regulations for the period in which we were immersed in a COVID crisis. But Council agreed at the last Council meeting that it wasn't necessary for us to continue with all of those powers because we are now in a more settled phase of responding to the pandemic. So we've reverted to the normal urgency powers for the Chief Executive. Now, this decision was taken under the COVID regulations, but it wouldn't really have made a difference because those powers were fundamentally the same. And there's always had to be a provision for the chief executive, when the council's interests are being affected, needs to be able to take an urgent decision. And this is one of those occasions where he's taken that urgent decision. And those occasions will always arise as and when. And in addition to that, even though the amount is a large amount, it's within the chief executive's delegations under the financial regulations, the amount. So, you know, it's below the key decision threshold, so it didn't need to go to cabinet. And I feel perhaps the urgency question is one that shouldn't trouble us as much as just what is being decided about. And while I'm here, Chair, can I just mention that it is within the Overview and Scrutiny Committee's remit to make a recommendation or make a comment to cabinet or to the portfolio holder or to the officers.
Okay, thank you, Susan. That's sort of contrary to a note that was flagged up in front of me a few moments ago. Thank you. All right, so the wording as it stands at the moment is acceptable. Is that right? So I think we'll now go to the vote. You're saying regarding it's the nature of the decision, not necessarily the process that's been used to make it, because it does conform with what's in the Constitution. So it's really about the decision itself. But anyway, if this is still what you want to do is to refer it to the Audit and Governance Committee, then that's up to this board to decide. Yeah. Councillor David Kelsey, please.
Yeah, Chairman, I think the move that's put in there now to go to Audit and Governance is a good one, and certainly be supporting that to go forward. It does help in the future for clarity for anything else that might or may come along in the future. So may as well get it sorted now, Chairman. Okay, thank you. Councillor Howell.
Yeah, thank you. I think we're all probably on the same page, but the monitoring officer's point, it is correct. I think it's not about questioning whether urgency powers should exist. It's what you can do under urgency, what qualifies as fitting into that category of urgent that needs to be looked at. So as long as that's understood by that recommendation, I think that's fine.
Okay then. So Democratic Services, would you like to take a vote, please? We have a recommendation from Councillor Mark Howell, the recommended referral to Audit and Governance Committee to review urgent decision-making powers, seconded by, was it Councillor Kelsey?
Councillor Slade.
Councillor Slade, I would have been happy to second it, Chairman.
Beg your pardon, Councillor Slade. Yeah. So, yeah, Democratic Services.
Thanks, Chairman. Can I just check that the monitoring officer didn't want to come back in on anything? Just the hand was stood up.
Your hand is up. Yeah. Susan?
I beg your pardon, that was an historic hand, Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bartlett then, please.
4.
Councillor O'Neill.
4.
Councillor Allison.
4.
Councillor Borthwick.
4.
Councillor Brooke.
4.
Councillor Debman.
4.
Councillor Dion.
Against.
Councillor Earl.
4.
Councillor Edwards.
4.
Councillor Farr.
4.
Councillor Fear.
Abstain.
Councillor Howe.
4.
Councillor Kelsey.
4.
Councillor Slade.
4.
Councillor Wilson.
4.
That's 13 in favour, Chairman, 1 against and 1 abstention.
Okay, thank you, members. So that move is carried. Unless there's any more debate on this, I'd like to close this item down now. See no more hands. Okay, I'd like to move on now to agenda item 7, scrutiny of homes-related cabinet reports. And we have a very important paper in front of us, homelessness and rough sleeping policy, which will be introduced by Councillor Bob Lawton, who's the portfolio holder for transport and sustainability. Thank you very much, Bob. Nice to see you.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. I'd hate to correct the chairman, but I'm only portfolio holder for homes, not transport. But I like the promotion, but that's quite.
Sorry.
But I can do lots of things, you know. But
okay, all right.
Multitasking is not one of my greatest tasks as a mere male. What I'd like to do, Chairman, is introduce part of the paper along with my colleague, Councillor Allen, who's lead member for this, if that's okay with yourself.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Thank you. As we prepare to launch our new co-produced strategy and its related action plan, there are many positive aspects and areas of progress which we need to build on as we proceed in implementing the strategy and its ambitious and transformative commitments. These commitments have received a high level of agreement through the comprehensive consultation process, with all of them having agreed levels of over 75% and the vast majority over 80%. These offer an opportunity to bring radical and lasting positive change to the BCP region. We had made demonstrable progress in many ways, which we want and need to build on and go forward. Alongside this, there are many recognised challenges which we need to build collectively and overcome in order to achieve what we are aiming to do. We need to focus on both the progress that is being made and also the areas of challenge to ensure that improvements are ongoing and lasting. The action plan addresses these challenges in partnership with our stakeholders. And if you don't mind, Chairman, I'd just like to read out a couple of headlines which councillors and officers may not be aware of, and I think it's a credit to BCP Council and us as councillors. We're amongst the top 10 council homelessness prevention outcomes in the last year of 1920. We have a 65% reduction in rough sleeping in the last 12 months from November 2019 to November 2020. Further reduction since November to the lowest levels in over a decade, below 20 for 2 counts running in 13 and 16. Number 6 in the country in terms of reduced numbers of people rough sleeping. Around 50 interested stakeholders in the partnership regularly meeting in the Homelessness Forum. Over £5 million achieved in grants from government to support the work in the last 12 months. We've received national recognition for the Homeless Reduction Board and overall partnerships approach. Exemplar council sharing learning with others at a range of peer events. Crisis recognised council as ahead of the curve of councils in workforce development with housing options service, including being mindful of past and current trauma and having a focus on people, strengths and aspirations. And of course, we've received parliamentary recognition with the MP Luke Hall, who visited BCP some months ago. If you don't mind, Chairman, I'd like to quickly hand over to Hazel, who will just finish off.
Yes, thank you. You're muted, Hazel.
Sorry, thank you, Bob. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the committee for allowing me to speak. I'd like to first of all just thank all the partners and the hard work and the co-production around this strategy, which does represent many people being involved. I'm going to speak on the implementation. So the strategy, its related commitments are relatively high level in nature and cover a wide scope of homelessness. The action plan seeks to break these down into actions which can be given specific focus as well as being more individually measurable. The action plan takes each commitment and assigns 5 actions to each one. Each commitment and its related actions will then be assigned to one homelessness partnership action group to deliver and to monitor progress. This will mean that the action group most relevant to the area of work in question will be responsible for it, although there will be cross-cutting elements. And it also means that the work will be shared out and involve multiple partners in the homelessness partnership. This will retain the co-production element and related ownership, as well as sharing the accountability for delivery. The action groups currently include areas such as health, rough sleeping, financial inclusion, lived experience, comms, and community support. And the proposal through the strategy is to have some further groups included. One is upstream prevention, which is really important, and data and insight, which is again important to find out and to inform us of how we're getting on. These groups will also involve small subtask and finish groups where necessary. The action plan is comprehensive to a wider extent than seen previously, but will retain the flexibility and ability to add actions if necessary. The Homelessness Reduction Board will oversee the work and receive regular updates in terms of progress and outcomes, as well as slippage and risk. This will ensure that successful progress is maintained. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, members, I see we have Councillor Kieran Wilson, please.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Councillor Lawton and Councillor Allen, for presenting the report. Firstly, I want to say what a fantastic strategy this is, and the accompanying action plan too. And I feel proud to have contributed to it. The progress that has been made over the last 2 years, as Councillor Lawton has already kind of spelled out, of helping those experiencing homelessness has been phenomenal. From creating the Homelessness Partnership to getting a number of those sleeping on our streets to 13 at one point, the lowest in over a decade, is brilliant. And I think this strategy builds on that. The way it's been co-produced with local charities, agencies, looking at best practice is certainly going to shape our work positively. And I really can't speak highly enough of the passion and the level of research that's gone into it from the team, from Fraser and Ben. The housing first approach, person-centred, is something that I endorse. I love the emphasis on homes rather than units of accommodation on page 119. And as I was going through the action plan, I couldn't help but say, that's great, I like that. Oh, that's really going to help, kind of every line. However, like putting my scrutiny hat on, I do have a few points that I didn't kind of previously when I was looking at it as just kind of a member of the public, a resident. When I've looked at it with the scrutiny hat on, these things have come up for me. So firstly, with regards to our definition of homelessness, it states no accommodation available in the UK or abroad, and this feels slightly uncomfortable. I feel that if someone is living here and doesn't have access to a house in this country, it is hard for them to then subsequently fulfil the sixth part of the definition of securing entry to their home. So I'm not sure if this definition needs a bit of rewording. I also wonder if we need specific strategies, though maybe not as extensive, for specific groups of people. For example, the strategy doesn't really make reference to the experience of women. There is a mention of a bespoke offer for leaving prison. However, the more general experience of women, which is significantly different to men, isn't highlighted. A crisis run event I attended recently highlighted the issue for me, that a lack of a gendered approach to design and funding can lead to women disengaging and disappearing from our services. As well as this, the report highlights around 20% of our homeless applications have come from those under the age of 24, yet there is a lack of specific actions to address this. So do we need something more tailored? One of the core aims is to ensure any victim of domestic abuse has somewhere safe to stay and receive support, and rightly so. However, in the research in the report, it shows just 2.9% were found refuge spaces. So I think that's just to highlight something, you know, we're doing a lot of good work, we've got to go a lot further. Something that arose during Health ONS was the idea of dignity and the way experiencing homelessness is treated. And I think that could be more explicit within the body of the document. In the action plan, it states an action of maximising humanising practice, including ending the use of descriptions such as rough sleeper, which I believe is something that has come through the lived experience group. So if we want to do that, we should just do it. And I think there's no quicker win potentially than renaming the strategy simply the homeless strategy and revising its uses in the document. I also think it's important to say, as I'm sure the lead member is already aware, that this can't be in a silo. it has to be used as evidence for other documents, such as the domestic abuse or housing strategy coming forward. For example, our need to increase social and affordable housing and improving living conditions that's stated in the strategy. I want to finish on the positives because there's a lot of them, and I mean, so much fantastic work has gone into this. I think that the fact that we're part of the Centre for Homelessness Impact's groundbreaking research, that we've been nationally recognised, we're in a really good position with MHCLG to get funding. Our work around health is second to none. Housing First being upscaled, even simple barriers being removed, such as creating pet-friendly accommodation. These are all like fantastic things. And credit to the lead member who listened when I asked about addressing the issue of no recourse to public funds. Now a multi-agency task force has been set up to establish recommendations about fair access to prevention services and recommendation advice. So I think that's it from me. I've tried to keep it brief, but I could really talk about this for hours. I certainly welcome this strategy and thank everyone for the effort that's gone into production. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Lawson, did you want to come back on that? I think there were about 7 main points there. It's quite a lot to include. And anyway, if you'd like to give a response, thank you.
Oh, you're on mute, Bob.
I say that when I'm in bed. My wife says that to me, in bed, you're on mute. There's a few points that Kieran has raised. I'll leave he's made a couple of points about females, so I'll leave Hazel to answer that. She's in a better position than I am to answer those points about females. And we have taken them into account in our equality impact assessment. But I do take your point about some of the reword, and we can do that through Fraser and Lorraine, and I'm sure we'll take that account of the point you've raised. So I welcome and thank you for your acceptance and the support of what we're trying to achieve. It is a good paper. It's been well written by Fraser and Lorraine, which obviously myself and Hazel have had an input on. But yes, I'm pleased to present this report because I think we have done a super job. And just one other point, which is an interesting fact. In 2010, there were 12 people in Bournemouth who were rough sleeping. I'm sorry to use that word, but you've made that point. And 9 in Poole and none in Christchurch. I don't know why people don't like rough sleeping in Christchurch. And then in March 2021, there was 12 people in Bournemouth and 4 in Poole, and again, none in Christchurch. So it is the best, you're right, it is the best record in the last decade, and it's really a fantastic achievement for us as councillors and for us as a BCP council. I'll hand over to Hazel to answer your points about females.
Yeah, first of all, I'd just like to answer the point about rough sleeping. I think it's going to be difficult to remove rough sleeping from our language. I think what we need to avoid is referring to someone as a rough sleeper. But I think language is really important, and it's something that we need to sort of look at going forward. I would be very interesting to see the information you have on whether or not we need to look at gender and slightly more gender specific things around females. We do tend to see more males rough sleeping, but that may be purely because of the way that services are structured. But it would be interesting to see what you've learned and what you've researched, and we can take that forward. I think, as I said in the beginning, and I think as the officers have said, and particularly Fraser, this is a work in progress. The action plan can be updated, and if we feel that there's some specific work around that, then it would be good to look at that. So I think I'll leave Fraser to take that away. Thank you. And the other points, I think we'll make a note of all of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I bring Councillor Edwards in, just like to ask Councillor Lawton what the mechanism would be for accommodating the note, the points that Councillor Wilson has made, because once this strategy's been approved by Cabinet, is there a mechanism that you can routinely amend it as required? What are the mechanics for that, and the effect on the fact that it will have been an approved document?
Well, as Councillor Allen has hinted, Chairman, is that it is a live document. It's not written in stone. We will adapt it as necessary to take account of any change in circumstances. I'm always a great believer in flexibility. You have to have flexibility to accommodate people who sometimes have fallen on rough times, and we try to be as humane and as amenable as possible to try and help as many people as possible who are falling into a difficult circumstance. And we try to do that by having a flexible policy. Fraser and Lorraine and Ben Tomlin are excellent officers, along with the people who work for them and in their teams, who take account of the difficult circumstances in which people sometimes find themselves. So the answer to your question, yes, it's a flexible document which we will adjust as we go forward.
Yeah, thank you. It was just the mechanics of actually updating it as and when it needed to be, and what the process for that was. I wasn't questioning anything about flexibility.
Could I suggest, Chair, that we just ask Fraser to comment on that, as he is the gentleman that wrote the paper. Fraser, would you be able to do that? Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Fraser.
Okay, yeah, sure. Thanks for all the comments. That's really helpful. I think, as has been touched on, the strategy itself is fairly high level. The detail is really in the action plan, and the action plan is easy, to be honest, but relatively easy to update, and we will be able to add actions in fact we envisage adding actions as is required. You know, things change all the time in the homelessness sector, if you like, so it would be remiss not to change it. So you know, and that, so we can continue to take on points that come as we go, and that the strategy itself won't necessarily need to change as an overall document, but the action plan can easily change and will change.
Okay, thank you, Fraser. Councillor Jackie Edwards, please.
Thank you, Chair. On the 8th of March, Councillor Allen gave the Health and Adult Social Care Overview and Scrutiny panel a very comprehensive presentation on the homeless strategy, and thank you for that, Hazel. And it included the health services aspect for the rough sleepers and those in temporary accommodation. And we also learned that Health Watch will be looking at the implementation and monitoring of these health services. And later in the year, our committee will be looking at a review of the health services as mentioned in this homeless strategy. However, after the meeting, a question was asked from one of the members. What is the strategy to help those that don't want to be helped? And I also have a comment to make, and I have actually been in contact with Councillor Allen about this, and that was I asked both Poole and Bournemouth hospitals what information they gave out to the rough sleepers that came into A&E, and I did get information back from Bournemouth. And they print off, but just an A4 sheet. I don't think you can see it. Sorry, that they give to them. So I would very much like to see that there's a laminated, possibly A5 size booklet of these services, and that's telephone numbers for St Mungo's, shelter advice, substance misuse, where they can get food and clothing. Very important information. And if they had it as laminated and a smaller one, that they would be more likely to keep it, but that's going to get wet, they're going to throw it out, they're not going to keep it. So that was just a comment that I made, that we need to include like the A&E, because you know they do have to go, they have accidents like everybody else does and need to be treated. So I think that's from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Do you want to come back on that, Hazel?
Yeah, if Councillor Lawton's happy, I can answer that.
Yeah, I think Councillor Hazel is much more qualified to answer that one, especially at NHS, than I am.
Okay, so I'll take the first question first. Thank you, Jackie, for that. With regards to people that appear not to want to receive help, whilst most people do accept help when offered, particularly around accommodation to move off the streets. There is sadly occasions where, for many complex reasons, such offers aren't taken up. These are the minority, I'm pleased to say, and certainly with the work that's been done over the last 12 months, we've brought some rough sleepers in that have been entrenched rough sleepers for many years. So I think we're getting much better at this, but there are still barriers, and actually sometimes there is a rejection of offers. Sometimes it's around previous experiences of being in hostels and anxiety about being in closed spaces, mental health reasons, drug addiction reasons, and we are looking at those more complex, entrenched cases and trying to offer a bit more of a bespoke offer around accommodation, but also just multi-agency working proactively and comprehensive approach. And there's lots of regular meetings like the multi-agency risk management meeting and the multi-agency risk assessment conferences that that go on to try and have a more of a wrap-round offer. I do think that if you get the offer right and the support right, that you can bring people in, but it can often be very complex. And occasionally we do have examples where it appears on the face of it that things aren't being done and that things aren't moving forward. But the reality is that often they're very complex situations and prove problematic, and there's often safeguarding issues in the background that can't always be shared. So I think it's difficult, but I think the more that we work in a comprehensive way, the more that we look at more bespoke offers, as Councillor Wilson alluded to, more of a housing first approach, then I do think we will be able to work to bring more people in, but it is an ongoing process. Thank you. And then with regards to the leaflets, I have to again just explain that I do have a conflict of interest because I do lead the homelessness care team at the Royal Bournemouth Hospital. We're going to be reviewing the leaflets literature that we give out. It's quite a new team. Unfortunately, it was redeployed during COVID and they're only just coming back now. So it's definitely on their to-do list. And we're going to be working with Pool as well. I think a smaller leaflet laminated is a great idea. I've also checked with St Mungo's and who are the team that we commissioned to support rough sleepers, and they give out lots of regular information which we probably just need to share around community meals, the health offer, the timetable for the health bus, getting people signed up to a local GP, access to dentists, mental health services, drug and alcohol with We Are With You, in literature around naloxone, also literature on domestic violence, sexual assault, and also literature for LGBT contact services. And they do have a A5 leaflet. So I think what we just need to do is work together as a secondary care and out in the community just to get that leaflet right. And actually there's a lot of work going on around the out of hospitals model and how secondary and primary care and all the healthcare services are going to be working together going forward, which is very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you, Hazel. Councillor Lawton, did you want to come back in? I saw you put your hand up there. Sorry, you're on mute. You're on mute, Bob.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just wanted to make one final point. I mean, I have in my previous life in Bournemouth as portfolio holder been on quite a number of midnight counts over a number of years, and they normally take place from midnight till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and obviously it's a long day and long night. But the one point I would like to make is that we do come across quite a number of people who no matter how much we try to outreach to help them through St Mungo's, through the council teams, etc., just do not want help, are quite happy to live on the streets or where they are. Quite a number of them tend to be ex-military. And one guy said to me one night when I spoke to him, and because we were in the military, I was in the military as well, he said, I prefer to sleep to look at the stars, which I could understand. So although it seems occasionally the council is heartless, is not trying to help people, I can assure everybody here present that we do bend over backwards, but occasionally we come across people who prefer that lifestyle as much as it's difficult for us to understand. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lawton. Councillor Leslie Dedman, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, first of all, can I say it's a really, really good paper, and well done to all concerned. One of the things I did really pick up on it and think is excellent in all of these things is information from those who have lived the experience. You can't beat that. I mean, it's no good us who, I assume, none of us have had to do rough sleeping. You know, it is the lived experience. One of the other things I think Councillor Allen was saying about sometimes reasons. One of the reasons I've been given when I've been out on, as Councillor Lawton was saying, these sort of pickups and have a look rounds, is they say that other people steal their things, and I sort of that awful the feeling that they just don't want to be with other people, and it's such a complex issue. And yes, I agree with Councillor Edwards about these numbers, but equally, I think there are loads of offers of help that people have, and I think it isn't for lack of information. I think it very often is a far more complex reason why people won't come in, as we're terming it. And also, can I pick up on, I think, Councillor Lawton's comment about Christchurch is a bit backward in the rough sleeper department. Well, that's really good. That's something we don't want to be up there with you and Bournemouth and Poole. Thank you. But seriously, there was a huge amount of work done over here. We were very, very careful. And also, I think there are sometimes rough sleepers under the stars on the beach just for a couple of nights and they move on. But that's a different thing altogether. So, yeah, congratulations. I really appreciated that.
Thank you, Councillor Dedman. Councillor Kelsey.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Firstly, may I echo what most of the other speakers have said. This is an absolutely amazing report, and my huge thanks goes to Lorraine and her team and everyone. But in particular, could I mention Ben, I think it's Ben Tomlin. I have a veteran that I look after out on the streets. He's been out on the streets for more years than I care to remember. Purely will not go into a bricks and mortar building. And I know the teams have tried all they can to try and get him inside over the years, and he just point blankly refuses. I spoke with Ben about it. Following a conversation with Ben, went back and spoke with the veteran. He is now in communications again to try and find him a suitable venue to live in. Not bricks and mortar, but something, as Kieran said earlier, something that suits the person and what that person actually wants. And I think that's a great way of moving forward. It's not always a case about putting everyone in a room with a bed and everything. Some people don't want that. This guy, you know, he'd be happy with a beach hut. You know, give him a beach hut or a piece of land that he could put his tent on, and he'd be absolutely over the moon with that. So I congratulate the forward way of thinking now that's coming forward. I think it's an amazing piece of work. So my thanks to everyone on this one.
Thank you, Councillor Kelsey. Councillor Lawton.
Again, can I thank Councillor Kelsey for his kind comments, much appreciated. And can I assure Councillor Dedman that I wasn't passing any slights on Christchurch. In fact, I would take it as a compliment that people don't find it difficult to sleep in in Christchurch. So I honestly didn't mean any slight. It was a jest, but obviously you took it in the spirit.
And none taken, Councillor Lawton. We're very proud of that. We're glad you mentioned it. Thank you. Sorry, Chairman.
Sorry, Councillor Allen, did you want to come back on something before I move on to Councillor Slade on her questions?
Yes, I'm just picking up on what Councillor Kelsey was mentioning. We do have a working group where we're particularly looking at those more complex cases. And we are specifically looking at trying to be a bit more imaginative and come up with those bespoke offers. And you're right, David, what we would consider to be a home to us is not the same for everybody. And I think we won't end rough sleeping without coming up with some imaginative ideas. And there are some good ideas out there that we're looking at. So thank you for highlighting that, because I think it just shows how far we've come, that we're able to really start looking at those details. Thank you.
Thank you, Hazel.
Councillor Slade.
Thank you. yeah, obviously I echo what everyone else has been saying about the rough sleeper work. I took the leader of the Lib Dems out last year. He spent a morning with the team and they were amazing. And I've been involved with some of the homeless reduction board stuff in the early part of last year. I would like to just raise the issues around the wider homelessness, because this is obviously a homelessness and rough sleeping strategy, and we've really only talked about the rough sleeping, the very, you know, obvious. And one of the things that really concerned me in the paper was the increase in number of families with children who are presenting as homeless, an increase of 52% between 2018-19 and 19-20. And I wanted to know what in particular was being done around that. I know that the work in Princess Road, which we approved in the first year of BCP, was designed to provide temporary accommodation for families, but that's all had to be paused because of the lack of having a SANG and not being able to build anything in Bournemouth with, you know, beyond a certain size. So I wondered what temporary solutions to that temporary problem of temporary housing we were doing about families, and also this is probably more towards Councillor Lawton, what are we doing about dealing with empty properties in BCP, and what incentives are we giving to people who might want to downsize but not really know the benefits of downsizing, so that we can move people around like a jigsaw and make better use of our stock?
Was Councillor Bartlett on?
Councillor Lawton?
Oh, you're there, sorry. Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. You weren't on my screen. The short answer is on families. I don't have a quick answer to that, but I'll ask one of the officers to comment on that. But one of the priorities we will do is, obviously, if a person presents themselves to the council with young children, they will be a priority and they will be housed as soon, even if it's for the first night for B&B, we will house them as soon as possible. It's always a difficult one with children, and family breakups for whatever reason happen, which we're all familiar with, and I don't need to go into those details here and now. Your other, I can't quite remember your other point, is about what are we doing about empty homes? Empty homes, yeah. Yeah. When under Bournemouth Council, we had a full-time empty homes officer who had been moved into enforcement area in the last 18 months. Funnily enough, about a week ago, I had a meeting with Kelly Ansell where we talked about various things, and I've requested that either that officer has moved back into that role or we employ somebody to look at empty homes, because it was a female and she'd done a fantastic job of bringing empty homes back into circulation, for want of a better word. I mean, one instance, she managed to contact somebody who was living in Malaya and didn't realise that they'd been left this house in Bournemouth. So sometimes people are unaware that they've been, through a legacy, been left a property and are just unaware that is going on. We also had one instance, I'm digressing, but it's interesting to note that one person purchased the house next door to him. It was a male, because he didn't like neighbours. You know, it's quite, you know, it's quite unbelievable. But yes, I am going to tackle the issue of empty homes, because I believe it's grown in the last 18 months, especially with COVID, has accelerated it. And on the other point about housing people, we, as you know, we set up Seascape Homes under the Bournemouth Council, which is being continued through BCP. Unfortunately, we borrowed, I think it was 44 million, and we've still got about 11 million of that 44 left. And one of the things I'm going to do is put rocket boosters under the Seascape Homes to borrow more money to purchase more homes to house homeless families and homeless people, because I think it's a really, really important thing. It's all very well putting people in for a few days or a week into a B&B, but long term, especially with young children, they need the security of their own home and to rebuild their lives. So yeah, it's a very good point you raised, and thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Lawton. Lorraine Mealings has got your hand up. Did you want to come in on part of this debate? Hello, Lorraine. I can't.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Who? Lorraine?
Sorry, I've
Lorraine.
been talking to myself there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm Lorraine Mealings, Director of Housing, so I think everyone's answered the majority of questions brilliantly. But I just wanted to come in on that issue of families. Slade just mentioned, obviously, we're very aware that the issue of homelessness, obviously rough sleeping is the most severe form and the most visible form of homelessness. But unfortunately, there are many more households that we work with that aren't single vulnerable people. And obviously conscious of the potential impact of COVID when the eviction ban ends. It's due to end at the end of May. So I guess in terms of our approach to addressing that on an ongoing basis, and especially anticipating the impact of COVID, it is about focusing on the upstream prevention, liaison resources to get out and talk to landlords and tenants really early if tenancies appear to be going wrong. We've got a Let's Talk Rent campaign to communicate out to residents to encourage them to come to us early. And if all of that upstream prevention fails, you mentioned, Councillor Slade, that we've got a development ongoing in the Princess Road area, which involves a family hostel. So ideally, we don't want to be providing family hostels. We recognise that it's needed, unfortunately, it's better than bed and breakfast. We've got one scheme there. We're refurbishing another building to provide a family hostel, and we've got a new build scheme for another family hostel over in Poole as well. So there is lots of work going on, particularly around the families side of things, because that is a big pressure point coming over the horizon, I think. And just picking up your point about making best use of council resources as well. You'll be aware we've got a new allocations policy that was agreed, I think, October, and we're just putting that into practice, and priority is given to those that are under occupying their existing home to try to encourage them to downsize, because you're absolutely right, we've got about 10,000 council houses and we need to best match them with the appropriate family sizes and encourage people to downsize if they want to. So hopefully that covers a couple of those questions there. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. Councillor Edwards, please.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a comment as to why more families are having to go to the council for homes. I think some of it is coming from new legislation that's coming from the government, and it's making private landlords sell their properties because, as I say, new laws, and then there's this fear over high rises in capital gains when they sell. So quite a few people are actually getting rid of their properties now. Now, I'm not an expert on this, but I think you might find that's one of the reasons why families are being given notice and they're having difficulty finding suitable properties to rent in the areas where they want to be. So it's just a comment.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Edwards. I saw that Councillor Wilson put his hand up again just now, but before I bring him in, I've just realised there's a couple of things I do want to raise, but I've just realised I do have a local interest to declare in that I do own a property company that does let out properties to residents. And I'm also a member of the National Landlords Association. But before I come on to the private landlord bit, which I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. The figures on the rough sleeping are really down now, and that's highly commendable, of course. But I just wonder, you know, how much of that is down to the fact that the government have provided additional funding to make sure that we can house people in bed and breakfast and hotels and things. And I'm not sure how long that funding lasts for, but can we anticipate that the figures will go back up again when that funding is no longer available? So that's my first question. Sorry, I can't hear you. I can't hear. You're muted, Bob, and so are you.
Do you want me to answer that, Councillor Bartlett?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
We have, as the last count has indicated, I'm just looking at 16 people in the Bournemouth, Poole and Christchurch area who are rough sleeping at the present time. When the all-in policy was announced some 12 months ago, where the government said bring everybody indoors, etc., etc., there was about 300 to 350 people in accommodation within the Bournemouth, Poole and Christchurch area. There's now about 200, the last figures I'm aware of. So that means that from the peak of that figure I mentioned to what it is now, we have managed over a period of time through the hard work of outreach officers and housing officers to accommodate and put those people back into good accommodation, good sheltered accommodation, and hopefully integrate them back into society and help them to rebuild their lives. The number that are still left within accommodation, we're still working with them, and hopefully we will reduce that number further still and bring them, as I said earlier, back into society and to be useful members. The difficulty is obviously if the government withdraw the funding, and can we sustain that on the council budgets to maintain that number of people? We will do our best, and I'll ask Fraser or Lorraine just to give us an update on where we are with funding for those unfortunate people.
Thank you. So is Lorraine going to take this one?
I think it's Fraser, is it?
Yep. Do you want me to come in and then hand over to Fraser? Is that helpful? Yeah, I think, to be honest, Councillor Lawton's covered it very, very well. We have got around about 200 single people within. We haven't got a policy of evicting them from temporary accommodation. We are working with them very, very hard to move them on into settled accommodation. We're moving a month roughly out of bed and breakfast. The problem is that more people are coming back round because it is a bit of a circular issue. That is part of the strategy is to stop that revolving door. But we are still bidding money from the government. So we've got a couple of bids outstanding that we've put into government for the next financial year, which we hope to be successful with, that will provide that really proactive multi-agency to support to move that person, that cohort of people out of B&B into settled accommodation. So there's not a kind of a cliff edge coming at the moment, but as Councillor Lawton said, we'll have to play it by ear. And to be honest, we're not dissimilar to any other local authority in that regard either. Just noticed Councillor Allen's got a hand up as well. I think you might want to come in on this one as well.
Yeah, you're muted, Hazel. You're muted.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that funding is always going to be an issue, but I think what this very good work that's happened in the last 12 months will hopefully do is make us a lot more efficient, and that we use the resources that we have. We do have a lot of resources in this conurbation, a lot of great goodwill from charities and voluntary organisations. So I think it's about getting that approach right, that multi-agency approach, that partnership right, and it's also about maybe moving a little bit more towards a housing first and really sort of focusing on the right accommodation. So I think there will be we will have to look at the funding closely, but I'm hoping that we'll end up in a lot better place in how we approach people, so that hopefully we'll be more cost effective in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I just wanted to talk about the private rented sector just very briefly. And the first question, I guess, is, and there are huge figures involved here. I know that we've had this house purchase scheme for Seascape Homes, millions of pounds, of which we haven't spent all yet. But it is, I don't think generally the public are aware of just how much investment the council has made into providing temporary accommodation for homeless families. It's literally hundreds of homes, and it's multi-million pounds worth of assets. But as Councillor Lawton has intimated, it's still not enough. And I guess that's my question. Are we now finding that it's now difficult to move people on, and some of those people will now be getting to the point where they've reached the limit of their temporary accommodation, and are we able to move those people on into the next phase of their housing to then be able to accommodate the people that are now waiting? Or in other words, does that temporary accommodation become sort of permanent because there's nowhere else to place them? So that's that question. The second part question is, we have a housing forum. I'm not sure if it's called a housing forum now, but in view of the importance of the private rented sector in providing homes for people, is there a representative from the National Agency or a Landlords Association or something like that on that forum? How are private landlords being engaged? I think Lorraine just mentioned it just a moment, and it's mentioned in the report, but I'm not quite sure how the council is engaging with landlords in order to persuade them to provide homes to council or people offered up for tenancies by the council.
I'll Councillor Bartlett, I'll quickly answer your first question. The second question, I'll ask Lorraine or Fraser to come in to answer you about engaging with outside agencies because they're more familiar with it. You're right, the Seascape Homes has been a huge success for us. It makes money, but a very little money, but it breaks even, even if it lost money, it'd still be a success as far as I am concerned. And as I said earlier, I intend to persuade Adam Richards to allow me to borrow more money to purchase more homes. The biggest difficulty is obviously in certainly we can house families fairly quickly. It's more difficult to try and house single men occasionally, and the purchase of HMOs are not easy because they tend to be highly priced because landlords recognise that they can make a lot of money on them. But we have had some successes, and we are having successes, as Lorraine has indicated earlier. We're having them, if we're able to move on around about 30 a month, that's quite good. And I'm pleased to see that. Yes, some come back, but the majority manage to play their part in society again and rebuild their lives, having gone through a difficult period. But as regarding engagement, I'll ask Lorraine if she could quickly answer that question, please.
Thank you, Lorraine. You're probably fed up with me answering the same question from me, I suspect.
No, it's okay. I'm still thinking about the barbecues from previously. No, not at all. So yeah, just a couple of points of me, I suppose. In terms of the cohort that you've described, Councillor Bartlett, it is a tricky cohort that's currently in B&B in terms of mental health issues, substance misuse, and there is a challenge to source private sector tenancies, but it's not unsurmountable. We persevere. We've got lots of wraparound support, and we do successfully place people into tenancies of their own with that wraparound support. So we will carry on doing that. In terms of the Homeless Reduction Board, we don't currently have a private landlord representative on that board, and we were in fact having that very conversation a couple of weeks ago because we're 2 years on with the board, and I think it is appropriate. I think we've had conversations with the RNNI, not RNNI, NRLA, the Landlord Association.
Is the one,
that
yes.
one.
Yeah.
And we haven't gained a representative on the board, but I think that would be a really valuable addition. So I will definitely take that back, and I think we'll hopefully turn that one around. I think that'd be a really helpful suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. That's great. Councillor Kieran Wilson.
Cheers, thank you. Yeah, it was just a quick one to ask in terms, because obviously this is a strategy with an action plan, and it needs to be monitored somehow. Obviously, I know that it's going to be overseen by the Homelessness Reduction Board, but we as a council, do we need to monitor it through some process, whether it be annually through overview scrutiny, or I don't know, but I just leave that out there for discussion.
Thank you. Sorry, I got distracted then.
Can I just quickly answer, Councillor, quickly answer that one for Councillor Wilson? I mean, my suggestion would be every 12 months we could the officers and myself or whoever could do a report for the ONS panels to give an update on where we are and progress, etc.
Great, that's very welcome. We'll put a note in our actions to follow up on that. Thank you, Bob. I've got lots of messages coming up, but I see that let's get rid of that one. Councillor Wilson, is there anybody else that wants to speak? I think everybody that's wanted to speak has spoken. I see no more hands.
Can I just say, if we're finishing up, can I thank make a personal thanks to all the officers, Lorraine, Ben Tomlin and Fraser. Can I thank Kieran Wilson for his previous work. It is a super paper. I'm really pleased to present it to ONS, and I'll be proud and pleased to present it to Cabinet and to full council. We've made remarkable progress in how we handle homeless people. I remember some months ago that David Liddell, who was then Deputy Prime Minister, coming down, it must have been 18 months, 2 years ago, to encourage us and to give us money to try and tackle the blight of homelessness, which is a really tricky issue for councils and people up and down the country. So I'm really pleased and proud of this paper, and I'd like to thank the panel for their positive support and excellent questions. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Bob. Just before we move off, I know that Councillor Edwards wants to have a quick word. Councillor Edwards.
Sorry, yes, it was just for reasons of transparency that I do rent out 2 properties in Bournemouth, including one that I took off your homeless list. So gold star for me.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Okay, well, let's thank you very much for the report, Bob, and thank you, Hazel, and thank you, Lorraine and Fraser, and everyone else that's been associated with the excellent work that you're doing in this area. So thank you for that. Let's move on now to agenda item 8, the scrutiny of transformation of finance-related cabinet report, the future funds governance, which is going to be introduced by Leader of the Council, Councillor Drew Mello. Good evening, Drew.
Evening, Steve, and it's very best to be brief where you've had a long day already, but very happy to take questions after I've introduced Steve. And it's very nearly Easter, isn't it? So hopefully we can get there soon. So this is the Futures Fund governance paper. Just as a reminder, the Futures Fund very much is designed to go hand in glove with the big plan, which is our ambitious, world-class city region project. Effectively, this is the fund to enable the delivery of a lot of that work. Just a quick note, I think it's a really quite innovative piece of work, and it is getting some national interest. So particularly like to thank Adam for work, for the detail in terms of working the Futures Fund up with us. This is more specifically a governance paper, Chair, and there's one main element, effective governance layer that it adds into it. And then I'll just remind ourselves of our Council's financial regulations, which this doesn't circumvent. So effectively what we've done in this paper, Chair, is bring forward a Futures Fund programme board, which is to act as an initial gateway, so a quick, light touch, able to be set up really quickly team of people who can look at and check whether the plans that are coming forward fit the ambitions of the Futures Fund. That gateway, that Futures Fund programme board consists of 5 people, which is myself as the leader of a council, the portfolio holder for Regen, Chief Exec, Section 151 officer and the monitoring officer, Chair. And then it's designed so that effectively after that initial piece of work is done at that board, it works up to the regeneration board and then back through the full council process. So just to remind ourselves of that process, Chair, it very much doesn't circumvent, nothing in this circumvents the council's financial regulations. So anything that actually comes forward will have to still go through the full council process. I think we had some reminder of that earlier on in terms of under 500k, it can be an officer's decision. 500 to 1 million is a cabinet decision. Over 1 million is a full council decision. So as this money is spent, the council will be fully engaged in each individual scheme that comes up. And Chair, I'll also say, slightly reflecting on the early debate, we actually had a very interesting meeting about the opportunity around the forward plan to get a longer term view with the CMB yesterday. And one of the things that we asked for in that was to, through that process, to be able to link into all member seminars, more strategically, effectively, and so have a better longer term view on all member seminars. So it's very much my ambition that as these schemes are worked through, they will have the benefit of an all member seminar before they're often involved in the council process, Chair. So yeah, that's as probably as brief as I can be, if I may, respectful of the time. Very happy happy to take any questions. We've got Adam, our Section 151 and Chief Financial Officer with us, so we're very much happy to take any questions you may want to direct to us, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, Leader. Members, do I have anybody wishing to ask a question? I'm getting all sorts of messages on here and it's doing my head in, to be honest with you. But I can't see anybody putting their hand up. Yes, I have now 2 people have indicated. Councillor Vicky Slade, followed by Councillor Leslie Dedman. Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to wait because I feel really bad. I've spoken on everyone tonight. Thank you. I totally understand. You know, this is your baby, and you know this is about the governance of it, and that's fine. I understand that it fits with the financial regulations around the levels, but I do have concerns that it could effectively be a credit card with a revolving limit of £499,999, that we could see a whole lot of money being spent without any level of scrutiny, any level of prioritisation, and I can't see anything in the governance that actually gives a criteria for how people are going to decide, how U5 are going to decide what is good spend. Again, we've got this very loose definition of infrastructure, which looks very similar to a list of physical assets, which might just as easily be something you'd see on the transport agenda or the SIL agenda. And I don't see those big landmark projects that you talked about, as I heard you talk about the Futures Fund as being these big ticket items that were a bit special. What I don't see in this paper is any of that. What I see is a recipe to print money as long as it doesn't go above £500,000, and I think that is politically very dangerous, because I think it's very open to being used without the right motivation. So I'd like to understand, what is the criteria for the spend, what is the governance in terms of how you're going to make those decisions, and I would like to propose that a quarterly update is actually published, whether it comes to scrutiny or whether it goes some other way, so that we actually know, you know, how this is going, rather than it's under 500,000, so it doesn't need to go to cabinet. So I'd be interested to understand what the plans are around that, and if necessary, we'll come forward with a recommendation depending on the outcomes.
Thank you, Councillor Slade. Councillor Miller, do you want to respond? And I know that Adam Richardson's got his hand up too, so he obviously wants to come in on part of this, but would you like to go first?
I think when Adam puts his hand up at that pace, Chair, there's usually a very good reason for it. So I look forward to Adam's response, and then I will be very delighted to come in behind.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Richards.
Chair, if I may, just a couple of the questions asked by Councillor Slade. First of all, you know, clearly, with regards to those thresholds and the threshold for Cabinet and Council, then there is the opportunity to scrutinise through your committee anything that actually would lead to report to Cabinet. In line with the normal process. So there is scrutiny, if you like, almost embedded within that process. With regards to the reference to print money, can I just remind councillors that the council has to adhere to the Prudential Code for borrowing. That is a matter for Audit Committee on an annual basis to set those limits. You know, in setting those limits, that is a recommendation to council. And all councillors, as part of the budget report, would have the opportunity to agree with regards to those limits as part of that process. And we're doing ongoing work to assess what would be an appropriate level of, if you like, overall debt for the 12 largest unitary authority in the country compared to others, because at this moment in time, we're on the lower end of the risk spectrum.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. Leader?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Adam, and Vicky. Thanks for the question. I do understand where you're coming from. I think all I can say is what does our administration have a track record for at the moment? Well, it is a lot of all-member seminars. So there is, I think you can see that there is at least an ambition to engage with members, deeply, well, and often. And very much that's my ambition around this. I mean, I think you're on record earlier this evening saying that we're actually engaging too often with members, so which I won't apologise for. So proof will be in the pudding. This isn't a futures fund paper. This is the governance part of a futures fund, effectively. So we're not. This paper shouldn't talk about the big whizzy ambitions, effective the schemes we bring forward, but talks about the governance of it. And I would agree with you effectively that I think you were sort of inferring that the expectation is that the larger items would be backed by a futures fund. So we'll see what comes up, we'll see what the ideas are, but I think more often it will be items that are larger than 499k will be likely to be futures fund. That absolutely doesn't mean that there won't be some that are lower, and it absolutely doesn't mean that if they're lower they might not still go through an all-member seminar, or we might still take them to cabinet effectively. So the ambition very much is around member engagement, getting ideas from across the spectrum of members and officers, and it's about moving the place forward. So that gives some comfort in terms of the level of member engagement, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mellor. I just to come back on that point, if there is money in a capital budget, for example, the director can spend it, and it's listed in the budget, so members know what the money's being spent on, and directors go ahead and spend it. In this case, we won't necessarily have a list. So for those items that maybe are under a financial limit that would otherwise have to go through the normal process of visibility through cabinet or full council, we won't actually know what's on the list because we don't have a budget, we don't have a list. So whilst I understand that you'd be open about what the ideas are, but how will members know what these ideas are? How will they be communicated? Leader?
Because Chair, if I may respond?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, great, thanks. Because one, actually, Chair, to be honest with you, we're going to want to talk about them. If the things we're bringing forward, we're acutely going to want to talk about them. For one, but also I appreciate we had a discussion today about a decision that was published, but it was still published, so it gave us an opportunity to talk about it. Very much the ambition, Chair, is for transparency. So, and effectively anything that is above £500,000 will have to go through full process, and on top of that full process you have our commitment, which we're proving every day, and every week, effectively, around all member seminars and member engagement. So I'm perfectly comfortable with effectively the way it's moving forward, and I think time will prove that, Chair.
Okay, Leader, thank you. Councillor Leslie Dedman.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I must apologise, my lights went off earlier. I think it's too late for me over in Christchurch, but I think I've got a light on now. I can just about see all of you. Yes, I know this is all about the governance of it. I just wanted to say that in part 2, I must point out that I think you say, Leader, well, I'm pretty sure you do, it's to do with the vision and narrative, the aspirational themes for the place from the original LGR planning paper. Obviously, I hate to say this, I sound always like the broken record. We didn't like that LGR planning paper, and I just want to point out that Christchurch, and certainly the group that I am now with, were not in favour of it. Having said that, Leader, the governance arrangements are a different thing. I have read it through quite carefully, and I think I'm going to be guided by everybody else's view on it. So, as I say, Chairman, I just wanted to make that point that LGR is still quite an emotive subject over here, and the city region, I think if you remember, it was going to be the city by the sea, it was going to be all sorts of things. There will be feeling in Christchurch, as I say, that I'm passing on to you. But thank you very much, Leader. Sorry, thank you very much, Chairman and Leader. Sorry. Yes, it's getting late over here.
Councillor Mark Howell.
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple of technical points about process, really. It says in the report that 5 tranches of £10 million, but presumably that doesn't mean that you're pulling down £10 million a year and sticking it in the bank account until you and just drawing down in sections of that, because I assume that's not the case, because Adam would need to be satisfied that he knows what the money's going to be spent on and will have gone through the appropriate checks to make sure there's a repayment profile. So it's what is actually happening that the amounts getting drawn down in different amounts, subsections of that £10 million throughout the year.
Shall I answer that?
Well, I see Mr. Richards' hand is up,
Okay.
Ready to pounce.
Adam, yeah.
Just to be clear, only when a business case has been signed off and been through the governance process. We will not just draw down the money anyway and just stick it in the bank account, because actually at this moment in time, that would probably be a costly thing to the council and would expose us to unnecessary risk. We will draw down the money once that business case has been signed off, in line with the cash flow needed associated with that business case.
And so if I may just add, may I just add first, Chair, and then maybe Councillor Howe. I want to like to finish answering Councillor Howe's question.
Yeah, go on. Yeah, please.
Yeah, and effectively the point is it's an illustrative piece of work. We felt that we needed to show what the impact of the Futures Fund would be in the MTFP. So effectively that's why it's £10 million a year. So apologies for any confusion, but it's important that the future impact of this is reflected in the MTFP.
Yeah. So it's really a maximum limit of 10 million a year.
Chair, if I may,
yes,
it's
please.
yeah. So effectively, it's a maximum limit of £50 million. It's illustratively at £10 million a year. So if we spend it slower, then effectively you'd have space in the MTFP. If we spend it quicker, then you'd need to bring the MTFP full impact on the MTFP forward. So, but that was our best illustration of what we were trying to do. It ties in with the length of time of the big plan ambition to deliver 15,000 houses, 13,000 jobs, 3 billion of investment in that 5-year period, which is why we thought 5 years was the best for the purposes of illustration.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, you've finished, Councillor Howe?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Mike Brooke.
Fine, thank you, Chair. First point, I've got 2 points really. The first one's for some sort of clarification. I've been looking at the chart for the equivalent for the MTFP. I note that the estimated cost overall is near enough £21.5 million of interest. Is that over a 5-year period, or is that over an extended period in terms of payback? Because at the end of the day, we're paying back 71.5 million, because the capital is to go back as well. That's an awful lot of money. I know it's the right time of to borrow with low interest rates, but actually, where is the money coming from to actually pay back? Because if I've read the paper correctly, the type of things that are being spent, this money is going to be spent on, are not going to be revenue earners. So where is the revenue coming from to pay back the high levels of interest and the capital that we're borrowing? That's the first point. The second point is that if any schemes do come forward, what are the criteria for how to assess the spend in the first instance? Is it just, oh, this is a good business case, therefore, yes, we're going ahead with it? Or how do we assess the business case? What criteria have you established for evaluating any proposal? So one for clarification, one for a question for answering. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. I think you wanted to answer the first part.
Okay, if I have a go at the first part, then in the answer to the first part, the answer is 50 years. The whole modelling's been assumed over 50 years with regards to the repayment of principal and interest over that period of time. And, you know, when you look at it and look at the 20 million compared to the 50 million pounds, it always reminds me of my first mortgage statement, you know, when I took it out on my first home, and actually you worked out you're almost paying 3 times the value for your mortgage of the actual value of the property at that point in time. So it's quite standard as part of that process. With regards to the impact on the MTFP, the actual revenue implications of this, you know, the amount required to repay the principal and the amount required to pay the interest has been factored into the medium-term financial plan as a pressure, and are therefore factored in as part of that process.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. Leader.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks, Adam. Just a few points on the first question. In terms of how it's funded, Adam's, you know, technically given the answer, but in the formation, in the genesis of this, there are a few ideas. One was effectively in terms of LGR and the benefits of local government reorganisation, and through that the transformation savings, at which we have a target of £44 million a year. So it's reasonable to suggest that some of that savings can then fund future borrowing, which then so we've got £44 million a year of saving. We've got £1.5 million a year that this will effectively end up costing. So there's a linkage there. This is also not that unusual in terms of schemes, TIF schemes, tax increment financing schemes, where there's an ability to borrow, often used in large-scale regeneration projects. So there's an ability to borrow against future receipts, effectively of increased growth and business rates. Just to give an example for that, on a more localised example, rather than formally having to have a TIF scheme or get approval for a TIF scheme, if we take the 15,000 homes that we're talking about there, if those 15,000 homes are paying £1,500 of council tax, then it's something in the region of, you know, over £23 million or something of investment. On top of that, you'd also get the money in from new commercial property as well. And the third way, if hypothetically we don't want to, you know, use either of those first two ways, it's a priority, you know, so it's a priority like any normal piece of council spending, effectively. So that £1.5 million a year to unlock the growth that we're talking to do, to unlock the big plan, is a priority. I will just briefly question, I think you said high levels of interest. My perception is actually it's very low interest. Debt's never been cheaper, which is why now is the time to invest. So I don't agree with the comment around high levels of interest. And I believe even the Liberal Democrat or the Unity Alliance, I can't remember which one, lead spokesperson for finance, you know, is on record agreeing with me that debt is cheap, so we should be now is the time to invest. I think that was the questions, Chair.
Yes, I think so. On to you.
Absolutely, Chair. I did not say high levels of interest. I said now is a good time to borrow.
In that case, Councillor Brooke, I do sincerely apologise. I jotted that down incorrectly. Please accept my apology. Yeah.
Seems we have an accord. Great. Okay, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. No, I think my question was answered. It was just understanding how this is going to be paid back, because I understand it when it is housing, but when it's just a priority, like, so it is just going to be kind of over 50 years. Somebody's going to have to pay. It's going to have to be paid back somehow. Not necessarily with a plan for that. So I was just getting that clarified.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Brooke, did you want to come back on something? So you're muted. You're muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. The actual question I asked wasn't answered about the criteria for assessment.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, my apologies for that. Effectively, this is a slightly, you know, so technically we will be looking for a business case. But the difference, and we have to write up a business case for the effectively the PWLB borrowing. What is different in this instance is we're not expecting, it's not a necessity that there's a matching income stream for that for that business case. So it would be reasonable to say the business case is that it is something that we think is positive for the area and we want to do it effectively. So the word business case might be slightly misleading because we technically mean that it adds up effectively. So I'll just run through the three main areas in the thinking of where this investment will be. Regeneration projects which have some viability issues. So if we can get some things over the line, maybe we can improve the standard and the ambition of some of the regeneration projects by coming in and assisting on viability. It's public realm enhancements, the types of things that you'd want to achieve and do, but we don't have the technical business case to do it. And then infrastructure pieces around that, and that could be a variety of different pieces. But so I hope that helps in terms of clarifying the point around business case. But I know Adam Richards has an opportunity to answer more fully, Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Richards.
Chair, just to say that I think somewhere within the report it does identify that with regards to that supporting business case, we would expect it to set out the costs of the scheme, the level of contingency, the timeline, the operational costs and the risks associated with the proposal, and at the same time detail any extent to which we can achieve external grant, inward investment or income. And I think that's laid out within the report somewhere.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brooke, you okay?
Yeah, fine, thank you. Certainly, I'm okay with the answer from Adam Richards.
Okay, thank you. Members, I see no more hands raised. I will therefore draw this debate to an end, and I will also end the meeting as we've already discussed the future meeting dates earlier on this afternoon. So thank you, members, and thank you, officers, for all your support this evening, and we'll see you again. Good night, everybody.